Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in today's video we're doing episode 5 of our GPZ build series, and that is the tail section. Now the previous video was the what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how. This video is going to be the how-to for the tail section. Keeping in mind that this will be a long video. I don't know how long it is right now because it's not edited, but I'm assuming it's going to be between 2 and 3 hours. We're going to focus our attention on the modeling approach and less on the scanning and processing of the scan, just because we've done it on so many different parts. If you want to see that, we talked about scanning in our triple clamp episode. We talked about it for our front fender. We talked about it for our headlight, where we scanned the original headlight, or the KTM headlight that is in the headlight build. So if you want to get information on the scanning and processing and all that stuff, we've covered it already in the series and plenty of times on this channel. So I want to focus the attention purely on the modeling that's needed to go from a concept from the scan, which is a sheet metal tail section, going to a 3D model using freeform modeling, and then going to a 3D print back on the bike. So where did this all start? I'm probably going to get tetanus from this thing. Basically years ago, I built this. This is a sheet metal tail section version of what I wanted the bike to look like. This takes some inspiration from the original GPZ tail section. It took inspiration from a couple of bikes at the time that I was building this, GSXRs, ZX6, things like that, and kind of mashed them all together. So I really wanted a race solo tail, and I've built several of them before this one. And that was kind of where this inspiration came from. Now this tail section has been on this bike for 15 years. Sad to say, this project has been gathering dust. But this is the basis for the design that we want. So it already has some shape in 3D. I like the way it looks on the bike. It's just rough. Now the original intent when I built this was to body filler, smooth it out, paint it, and build a final part or a plug and a buck off of this thing. That never happened, but now we've got 3D scanning, we've got 3D printing. We've got much easier ways to do this than all of the banging and welding and sanding and body filler, dust. So that's what we're gonna do. So now that we know what we're doing, let's go ahead and hop in. We'll start with the scanning, the processing. We'll go through all that stuff quickly, and then we'll get into the 3D modeling in Fusion. All right, so with this process, we are not going to go through in real time the scanning and the processing of the scan. We're going to focus this video on the actual modeling of the tail section. I've modeled this before. Obviously, I've taken pictures. I have a physical 3D print of it. That one was done probably over a year ago, and there were some problems with it. I didn't have a great scan to really work off of, and there are a couple things that I wanted to address. But that is the basic thing that we're going to be creating. It's very similar. So with this process, I have basically hacked away the original subframe and rebuilt a very minimal one with 1/2-inch DOM tubing. And I need to scan where the tubes are. I need to scan the tank without the tail. And then I need to scan the tank, the bike with the sheet metal version of the tail that I made. This is roughly what I want the tail section to look like. So in order to scan this, a couple steps. We're going to use the RevoPoint Morocco. That's generally my go-to scanner. It's very portable, easy to use. Going to use it on far mode with some disappearing scan spray, just a little bit where needed for things like the subframe tubes and for the sheet metal tail section. You'll find that different scanners sort of treat these surfaces differently. Some are better than others. Generally, blue structured light scanners are better at capturing these darker areas, while some of them, the Morocco does okay in certain instances, but some things it won't pick up, especially if we're going from a painted surface like the gas tank to the subframe and dark areas like the shiny gloss black portions of the motor. So in general, just use a little bit of scan spray to give it some texture, and that way we can capture the data. We're not trying to reverse engineer everything here. We don't need to get super detailed. I just need to know where things are in space. So scanning with the tail off, scanning with the tail on. That way we have basically two sets of scans that we can use. I do want a little bit higher resolution where the tank, the tail section is going to meet the tank. So I scan this on near mode. And this is going to help with actually capturing things like the mounting points. The next step of this process is obviously to take it into RevoScan. You could do this on the Morocco directly, but I prefer doing it at a computer. I generally don't like to do things with touchscreen. I mean, like design aspects. So unless you're using the sort of one-click wizard, if you have to manually go in and remove like select areas, it's just much easier with the mouse and a keyboard. So I processed a couple of the scans, just basic stuff, fusion, sort of putting the points together and making sure there's not a bunch of extra data that we don't need, but I didn't go full crazy on it. And what I did was I aligned the tank scan with just the subframe, and then I aligned the extra piece that had more detail and merged those two together. Once I had a merged version of that, I then added the scan with the tail section on. And what this allows me to do is have a version of the scan without the tail section and a version with it. And because I'm adding the tail section afterwards, they'll be aligned the same inside of RevoScan, which means when I export them, they'll be aligned to the same coordinate system. Even if the coordinate system isn't right, they're aligned together. So this allows me to have a version of the tail section with the subframe underneath it, and then a version without it. Once I have this, then I move into Quick Surface. Now, in Quick Surface, we're not going to go crazy and get everything perfectly aligned, but we're going to do our best to make sure. Part of the problem is the subframe I built by hand, the tail section I built by hand, the mounting point for the tank is rubber isolated, so there's not a lot of great references to make sure it's centered. So I want to get it as best as I possibly can with the references I have, and then export it to Fusion and then double check it. So now with the scan created and processed and aligned, we can bring that data into Fusion. Now, if you want to follow along, you can go to the description of the video and download the dataset that has two mesh bodies in it. Both of these mesh bodies have been created through the video process, and they were then remeshed in Fusion to reduce the mesh count. So for example, if we take a look at the mesh that has the tail section, this one originally was almost 7 million triangles. And now if we take a look at it, it's under 1 million triangles. So it's going to be much easier for us to work with and manipulate. You can see here it's, maybe this one's 2 million. So 2 million down from about 8 or 9 million. It's still quite a bit easier for us to manipulate. The second thing that was done when it was brought in is I right-clicked and made each of them unselectable. Now, the reason for this is because when you hover the cursor over any geometry that's been created, whether it's a sketch or whether it's a solid body or a surface, Fusion has to highlight that. Now, that's not really a big deal if you're talking about a cube that has 6 faces or you're highlighting the edges on it. But when you talk about an object like a mesh that has millions and millions of triangles, it really bogs the system down. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, currently, I have the edges turned off, or I changed the display. So under visual style, I use the shortcuts Control and 4 and Control and 6 quite a bit when I'm working with meshes, just simply because the fact that when you are looking at a mesh, all these tiny triangles just come up as a really dark body and it's hard to see the edges. So Control and 4 will hide those. And this just gives me a better view. Another thing that you can do is you can right click and change the opacity, something a bit lower, like 40. This helps because when we're working on a freeform model, the box display is typically going to be inside the mesh when the smooth display will be on the surface or outside. So if you're having difficulty, you can do things like that, change the opacity. Keep in mind, again, the second sketch or the second mesh has the merging of the scan with the subframe and without, so we can see the subframe on the inside here. And these are not great scans. I mean, the tank is really nice, but the rest of it was just kind of quick and dirty. I think I scanned all of the 5 different scans that I did, probably only took 5 minutes total, maybe some of that waiting for the scan spray to off gas so I could actually use it. but it was really quick. It wasn't a very long scan. I certainly could spend quite a bit more time getting better scan data if I needed it, but really only thing I'm concerned with is having a good reference at the tank. Everything else doesn't really matter. I'm not exactly copying the sheet metal tail. It's just being used to give me an idea where we want to go. And full disclosure, I have modeled this tail before. Probably over a year ago, I did this off of a completely different scan, and there are problems with it because the scan that I had, I didn't have a good reference for the tank. So you can see here the tank is actually, well, you can't see there. It's actually missing that bottom edge. So the problem was it doesn't really fit very well, but it was good enough for me to print and test it and put it on the bike and see a couple of areas where I had problems. And one of those areas is at the tank. Another area is actually the subframe. So it's not in this model here, but I mean, there's a couple points floating around inside there, but basically the subframe is hitting the bottom of the tail section here. So this edge needs to drop lower. But this is basically what we're going to be doing is creating this tail section. So back in our file, if you're going to follow along, another thing that I did that is, in my opinion, helpful to just double check alignment, because there's not really any good references here that I could use in Quick Surface, is I made a sketch on the top, just top looking down. And basically what I did was I have a line that represents the midplane origin. So when we get into forms, we're going to use symmetry, and we want to make sure that the mesh is not only, aligned left and right, but also it's not like angled funky around the z-axis. So basically what I did is a top-down view, and I did a vertical line. In this case, it's along Y, and I made sure that it came out about centered on the tail, and it was centered on the tank as best I could. There's no reference here. And then what I did at various spots is I did lines that were attached at the midpoint. And I can see here, this line is a little bit outside the tail there, but it's okay there. The main thing that I was concerned with was the tank, because the tail, again, it's not mounted. It's just a sheet metal one that I made. It's very possible that it's not symmetric. I mean, I'd be shocked if it was symmetric. Even though I measured everything on the sheet metal before I created it, it's still a handmade part. This looks pretty good. It's maybe a tiny bit off, but overall looks pretty good. And then the front of the tank, kind of the same thing. I wanted this line, these points to be about the same. You can tell the tank looks like it's maybe shifted just a little bit in the positive X, but honestly, that is going to be completely fine for us in terms of the 3D print. One thing that is slightly concerning to me looking down at the scan is the subframe appears to be shifted a bit to the positive X, and the subframe is just tacked on right now, so that's not a huge deal if it's a little bit off. When I created it, I did a tape center line on the tank and I stretched it out, but there's no reference out in space for that, so I'm not going to put a whole lot of stock in the subframe being straight, and I'm really focused more on the tank, and then again the tail is what we're sort of aiming for. So again, that's just another kind of last check that I did to make sure, like a sanity check before I got started with the design. And that sketch is also in there in the file that you started with. All that to say that we can now start a freeform model. So remember, the bodies are currently not selectable, but that doesn't mean that we can't snap to them. It just means that we can't click on them in the canvas area. You have to select them over here. So if you're trying to change their appearance, or if you're trying to do something else with them, you have to select them here. But things like a create freeform face with object snap will snap fine to this. So the thing when we get created, and I know I say this in pretty much every freeform video, is to stay in box mode, and also to keep it the fewest number of faces possible. So this is just our starting point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create basically the largest possible four-sided faces that I can. And you can see that it's hard to see. This is where the opacity comes in. But basically what I want to do is I'm going to go to there, and then I'm going to come back to probably about midway. And then the endpoint will turn blue when I find the edge of that last one. And if you can't, we can always temporarily hide that and bring it back. We're not going to be able to change the opacity very well mid feature like this. So I'm going to go ahead and start there. Come back to probably about where this transition is. So maybe right there. Again, don't worry so much about this. We can add more detail later. Find those endpoints. Come back to probably midway on the tail section. Again, this is sort of an inflection point. This is kind of going up and curving down. And we'll find those endpoints. Again, the blue points. And I want to leave an extra section on the back. So we'll come to maybe there. And we'll say, okay. So Control-6 to bring the edges back. Select this. Alt and 1 to go in box display mode, which you can also do from utilities. I personally, I always go back and forth between box and smooth display. I don't ever really use this middle one. I think it's just, for something like this, it's just a bit too confusing. And the main thing when we're trying to use something like a box display is we can get a pretty good idea as to what the final shape is going to look like from the box display without having to worry about additional edges to control transitions and things like that. So it's extremely important to be competent in creating freeform models in box display that are close approximations to your end design. Now, if you're coming from another program like a poly program like Blender, this should be no problem for you because generally you create the low poly model and then you subdivide it. That doesn't really work the same here. I mean, we can subdivide it, but we don't want to universally subdivide it, but we end up putting in control loops and additional edges where we want those transitions. Looks like Fusion's having a little crisis of conscience here, changing the opacity on the mesh. So I'm just going to give it a second to think. This does happen from time to time. One thing I have noticed, which I can't show you right now because it's thinking, if you go into your help menu and to, I think it's performance and diagnostics, I think is the name of the menu. Yeah, let's just do it now. Support and diagnostics. Go to the service utility and then network diagnostic test. What I've noticed is when things slow down, like browser related things, or if we're potentially looking at issues with the data panel opening designs, it usually points to an issue in here. And you can see here that this is the Amazon Web Service AWS. That is coming up red. Everything else is okay. But this one here is coming up red, which leads to a potential problem. Usually the reason for this is based on network permissions, so not getting through the firewall or something like that. I don't really want to go through the hassle of it right now. I'll just kind of deal with slow saves. But just so you know that that's there if you tend to run into a problem. Okay, so now we have, again, Control and 4 to hide all those edges. Now we have the basic shape of what we're trying to design. This is a good time for us to take this and try to mirror it. So we're going to use symmetry, but the mirror duplicate. And the mid plane here, the YZ plane, hopefully this is close on both sides. And it looks pretty close. This is kind of inside over here. So I'm going to use modify and edit form. I'm just going to pull this out. Control and 6 to bring my edges back. And I'm going to pull this out until it's sitting outside of the mesh. So when you do that, you can kind of see it's coming out of the mesh a little bit here. You can go ahead and move that and maybe move this entire edge. I'm not, at this stage of the game, I'm not too worried about accuracy because once we get to the point where we're thinking about adding additional edges, that's where we need to be really sure that we're precise with the location of these. This one back here would probably get pulled out a little bit, and this one get pulled out a little bit. And the main thing that I want to do with this, or what I'm trying to achieve, is I'm looking at where the underlying mesh or the scan data is popping through. And when I go to the other side, I'm trying to see where that is on the other side. Now remember, the tail section is made by hand, so I'm not going to put a whole lot of stock in it being symmetric. It's not even bolted to the bike. It's just kind of stuffed onto the subframe. So I'm not going to put a whole lot of stock in it being perfectly symmetric, but really what I want to see or notice here is how close we are to the tank on both sides. So if I'm using that as my reference, because we've got symmetry, so we can take this and move it up. And just as a quick note, our final goal is going to be to thicken this outward. So everything that we do should be up against the tank, and then we'll thicken everything outward. At least that's the hope. If that doesn't work, we can always thicken it inward and then just kind of move everything out a slight amount. But I think, for my money, that is pretty darn close. It looks like we have the same amount of space on both sides. And again, the subframe may be a little bit tweaked. I will have to address that. Well, very tweaked. I will have to address that when I finally weld it. I haven't welded it because all I have is a MIG welder here, and I want to TIG weld it to the frame, and I need to do a couple of other supports. So I will deal with that at some point. I'm not too concerned with it right now. I've actually kicked around the idea of making the tail self-supporting, which would mean the tail would need to bolt to the frame right here. And the other idea I had is to make the subframe removable before I finally determine to attach it there. So a couple of other things that we need to deal with. So here's one of the issues I had with that first tail section I made. This is the subframe, and I need to go below it because I want the tail to roll under. The next video for this series is a shock clamp that I made, and I've actually, full disclosure, I did that video before this one. So I already have the shock clamp. I should have included it in the scan, but it was supposed to come after this video, so I didn't. But that shock clamp attaches to basically this 1/2-inch DOM tube here, and the shock can either sit below it, or it can go kind of swing up and back. Originally, this bike had an airbox in that area and the battery. It doesn't anymore. Obviously, I've got the battery setup is underneath the tank clamp right here. It's for basically a sealed battery that can fit at any angle. And I'm not running an airbox on it. I had a plenum I built for the turbo kit, but I will probably just run this bike carbureted with pod filters in this iteration. So I've got plenty of room to play with back there. All right. The next thing that we want to do is connect these together to build out the seat pan area and start building out the midline. So the way to do, I mean, we could do this a couple different ways. You could use edit form and manually extrude these edges and pull them to the center. Again, you can see this thing is just not happy with me today. I've noticed ever since the last update, probably a week ago, things have, data panel browser have gotten really slow for some reason. So I'm hoping that a next update will fix that. But basically what we could do is we could take edit form and hold down Alt and pull this over. I don't really love this idea for a couple of reasons, but instead what I would do is go to the bridge tool, which I don't use very often if I'm honest, but this is a case where I would use it. Basically we select the second side and go to here. We have a preview on the screen, and the main thing that I want to see in this preview is an edge right down the middle. If we don't have one, it's really going to screw up symmetry. So I'm going to say two sides and say okay. And you can see that it just connects them. It goes straight across. I don't have to worry about any funky curvature or anything from me pulling those edges, and this is great. And this is also a good time for us to show why we don't design in smooth display. If I go to smooth display, this is not the end result I'm looking for. I need to have a tighter transition up here. This is very reminiscent of an early 90s GP bike, which, don't get me wrong, I love those, TZRs from early 90s and stuff like that, but it's just not the point of this tail section. So it's really good to get comfortable with designing in box display. All right, the next thing that we need to do is we need to start building up the back section. And this is another area where I want to make a note for you. If you're working across a symmetry line and you hold down Alt and pull this up, I get this question from time to time. The symmetry line disappears. And the reason for that is a bit strange, but these are not connected. So Control Z to undo, and we have to select both sides and then use Alt, and notice that the symmetry line is there now. So for whatever reason, when you are working across the symmetry line, you need to make sure you select both sides. And then what we're going to do is from the side, we'll just bring this up to about where it needs to be. And then we'll scale it down. I'm not worried about the secondary transition because when we build out these edges that flow back here, we're going to break this up in the middle. Right now, it's not a big deal. And always remember that box display is also going to be a little bit outside of what smooth display is. So don't waste your time trying to get this perfect. If this is up here, I can still move it after the fact. I don't really care. But with those edges selected, I also want to show you this. I'm going to left click to deselect it. If you just box select up here and only grab the area of that edge, then it'll select that whole edge for you. If you happen to do it from bottom right to top left, it's going to grab the entire face, and that's not what you want, because if we hold down Alt and extrude this, it doesn't do anything. It's just going to get messy, so you really want the top edge there. All right, so now we're going to hold down Alt, and the thing that I'm looking for here is to be in line with this edge. So I'm going to let go of Alt, hold Alt again, come back, be in line with this edge, let go, hold Alt again, and come all the way to the end, because that's going to sort of work its way back here. If you want to do a quick check, you can hit Alt and 3 to go to Smooth Display. You can kind of see what's going on here with the shape. Again, don't get too hung up on it, because what we're going to end up having to do is add in control edges that control this tighter transition, which means that what we see in Smooth Display now is pretty far off from what our final shape is going to be. Years ago, I built a tail that looked smooth like that for this bike and did the whole fiberglass body filler, made a mold for it, and I ended up just not liking it very much. So I definitely want to go with a little bit harder lines on this tail. Let's go ahead and hide the scan. And the next thing for us to do is to start to build out this area here. And the way that I'm going to do this is another tip for you. If you select an edge and double click it, it'll grab the entire loop. If you select an edge and hold down Control or Shift and double click another one, it'll fill in between them. So for example, if I wanted to go all the way to here, I could hold Control or Shift and double click and then just kind of fill that in. We only have 3 edges here, so it's not like a huge time saver, but once we start dealing with a lot of edges and you don't want an entire edge loop, that can be pretty handy. So like this bottom, if we don't want the entire edge loop, but we want from here to here for some reason, it can be a lot quicker just to do it that way. So we're going to select these 3, and I'm going to hold down Alt, pull this down, let go, hit Alt again, and pull it out. Don't worry right now about this. We're gonna fix that. We're gonna take care of that. We're gonna hit OK on this. We're gonna go to modify, insert point or insert edge will work fine here, but I'm gonna use insert point. Snap to that red dot on the left side, red dot on the right side. Simple insertion is fine. Basically what that means is it's gonna keep it exactly in the middle, even if it affects the shape, where exact insertion will keep the shape, but we're not even to the point where we care about the shape, so don't even worry about it. All right, now let's scale this in a bit. You can bring back the tail section if you want for some reference. And now we need to start manipulating some of these edges. We could have done this before we did this extra extrude, but it doesn't really matter at this point. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this point here, and this one is going to end up connecting to that. So I'm not really too concerned about it just yet. I just want to move it around to get it roughly close. And then this one is going to be traversing with the shape of the scan. So that means this one comes up and this one comes up and back like that. This one here, again, I don't really care about where these are, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So don't do too much moving those around. Just make sure that the points are easy to get to and then say okay. So the reason I don't care about where those points are is because we're going to use weld vertices, and weld vertices takes the first point we select and moves it to the second point, which means that I don't care where this edge is in space because I know that the first ones that we created are in the right spot. So it doesn't matter if this is 20 feet up in the air. All we need to really do is select those points and pull them down to the right spot. Again, we're going to let Fusion contemplate its life choices here while it thinks about what to do, and then we're going to go to weld vertices. So I'm going to take that point there, move it to here, this one down to there, this one down to there, this one, it's going to be kind of hard because they're kind of overlapping, to there, and that one to there. So again, it didn't really matter where they were. I'm going to say okay. And if you want to, you can hit Alt and 3 and take a look at a smooth display and kind of get an idea what we're going for. It's not a bad looking tail. Again, it's nice and smooth. And if we take a look at the bike with no tail section, that wouldn't be horrible. Again, it just doesn't work for me because of these harder lines on the tank. It's really more what I'm going for. I want to mimic these edges, and I want to give it a harder shape. But honestly, that's not a bad looking tail section in my mind. But let's go ahead and set it back to box display, bring our edges back. And at this stage, we have what I consider a low polygon shape, basically a low face count. So what I want to do now is I want to make some minor tweaks. So I'm going to pull this in, and from the side, that edge maybe come back a little bit. And really the main focus here, the main thing we're looking for is flow of edges. And when I mean flow of edges, I mean this loop right here. Right now, it's probably not ideal because it changes direction, but it works for this design because the upper sections are vertical and the shape that we want kind of flares out this direction. So if you think about building this, if you were building it out of clay or something, and you just had a block of clay that was, maybe this size here, and you took this and you pulled the sides out, the way that the edges are designed, we're basically taking the clay, we're pulling it out and backwards. And it works in this design simply because the back edge goes out and backwards. So it kind of mimics this final shape. So this one comes forward a little bit and then backwards. This one's vertical, but it does come, down and then backwards. And that's the main reason why I'm okay with this. If this was straight up and down at the back, I would probably want these edges to be straight up and down too. And there's an easy way that we could do that. So for example, I could go to insert point, and I could go from here to there, and then double click this edge and hit delete. And then that would allow me to build that out. Again, for this model, it's not the right choice. So I'm going to do Control Z to undo. But just kind of keep that in mind because every design is different and you're not going to be able to exactly replicate what we do here. But those are some of the things that I look for. So let's bring back the tail, and it looks like we're pretty close to the shape. Like I think overall, I think this looks pretty good. And it doesn't have to be exact. Once I have the style of the tail down, then it doesn't have to be exact because we're designing something new. The back is actually going to be pretty tricky. So the way that I'm going to start this is, well, first let's show the no tail and the subframe. I need to make sure that I'm below the subframe, and I can't really do anything here. So I have to decide where I want to start the undertail, whether it's up here at this point or if it's at this point. We just kind of have to decide. I want to keep it as smooth as possible. I really like that sort of floating tail section look, and I also like things to be pretty smooth. My original idea with this tail was to have a removable undertail, but since there's not really any electronics on this bike, the ignition module or the igniter box and the battery, they're pretty much it, because I'm not running a fuel injection system on it in this iteration. Maybe in the future, I don't know. But I don't really have anything to put back in the tail. It is just kind of extra. And I'm really considering the tail light itself because we're building it our own design. I'm just going to add potentially a mounting bracket. But the way that I'm going to break this design up for 3D printing is the back piece is going to be cut off and printed on its own. It's going to be in multiple sections, but that way I can just redo that last piece and attach it or change it out if needed. So the last piece will probably not get epoxied or put together until I decide what I want to do with the taillight. It's just something to keep in mind. But with that kind of said, I think I'm going to start from here, and let's move a couple other things around before I get to that far. So the edge coming off the tank is going to come down and roll back. It will probably be a pretty tight corner. The way that this worked on the original bike is it actually came down to about here, went back, and then it went up to the tail section, which was pretty thin. And obviously that was fine when there was an airbox and battery and all kinds of stuff behind it that it had to hide, but there's nothing there now that I want to hide. So I want to keep it as clean as possible. But I do want to keep, potentially keep this line straight or somewhat straight, just visually. And it'll bulge out a bit back here. So that looks pretty good. And this point right here, I probably want to pull back closer to the corner of the tank. We're going to have to do a bit of work here in that section. We may need some extra edges back here to make this work. But for right now, that looks okay. This point, probably pull it like that. Okay, just getting kind of close. This all is not going to really happen until we start adding more detail, and that's going to take a bit of time. But I just want to get to a point where I can start to build the undertail. All right, so that looks pretty good. Again, let's wait for Fusion to decide what to do about the dialog box. All right, so once again, let's use Bridge. If I can find it. Oh my goodness. And we'll go from there. Actually, let's do a couple of them. Let's take 3 edges. And we'll go to these 3 edges. Once again, I want to make sure there's an edge in the middle. So we'll do 2 faces and we'll say okay. And then I'm going to double click on the midline edge. And I don't want it to be flat. So I'm going to pull this up. So again, there's not much in the way of obstructions with the subframe. I made it as minimal as possible. Really, the whole goal of this bike over the years has been weight reduction, and the original subframe and the wiring harness and all that stuff was just really heavy. So I've dropped about 200 pounds off the bike, and part of that, the subframe was a big piece of that, wiring harness, center stand, original suspension, and things like that. So I do want to keep it pretty minimal, and this is also going to allow me to create attachment points directly to the subframe. So that way, keeping it as close as possible means I don't have to make huge mounting tabs or anything like that. That looks pretty good. So now I want to take these 2 edges, and what we could do is we could extrude them, again, holding down Alt, pull it back. You want it to be roughly where this line is, so let go, Alt again, let go, and we're going to say okay. And once again, we're going to go to weld vertices. So this is going to take care of both sides because of symmetry. And we'll go there. And now if we go to smooth display, the only reason I'm going to smooth display now is because this can highlight potential problems. If it doesn't let you go to smooth display, this likely means that you've made a mistake somewhere, or the edges are not connected. So now that we kind of see everything, what I want to do is take this one here and move it up. So when we're looking at this, I'm going to move it up in plane. Yeah, it looks pretty good. In general, when tail sections like this from, let's say, about the 90s, before the 90s, the rear wheel was pretty far up into the tail section. So the inner fender, as they were, was already curved because the upper part of the wheel was obscured by the tail section. Into the 90s, as the gap started to grow, early 90s, you started to see undertails like this that were curved. And one of the tail sections I built for this originally had something like that, but we've got tons of room between the tire. I mean, I don't have the tire in the scan, but this is the top of the tire here. That is never going to go there. So really, it's just about looks for this. All right, we need to connect. This is where it's going to get a little tricky. We need to connect and start filling in the back. And the way that I did this before, and we can just go take a look at the other one. The way that I did this before, let's see, where is the freeform model? You can kind of get an idea. Let's take a step back here. Kind of get an idea what I did. You can see the control loops here. I'll go to box display. You can see the control loops that were added. But essentially, I just filled in that panel and then came back with this loop edge to control the transition. And that's likely what we're going to do here. So it's not a hard edge. And originally what I wanted to do was this whole section was going to be the tail light, but I'm probably not going to do that. I'm probably going to do something below. And that way, if I decide that this is not a street bike, I don't have a big tail light in the back of the tail section. It's just going to be, closed like that. So that brings us to the question of how do we close it off? What is the best approach here? There are a few things that we could do. First thing we should do at this point is save the file, because I haven't saved it at all at this point, and that would be pretty upsetting if it just crashed and we lost everything. So let's make sure that we save the work that we've done so far. All right. And in terms of best ways to do this, I think, well, first that we need to connect this edge to this one. If we use the bridge tool like we did before, that's fine. It would work. But probably the easiest way is for us to use the face tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap to these 4 points and know that it's going to break symmetry. And it's fine for right now. What we're going to do is we're going to say, okay. We're going to go to insert point, find the red dot, which is right in the middle, and add that. And then we can move this edge up where we want to. So again, I'm going to kind of move it in plane here. And then we're going to go to weld vertices and just take this one to that. So that's one way that it could be done. You could extrude this edge, pulling it back to close to the middle, which is going to create one on this side, and then weld vertices as well. That would be fine. There are a number of ways that we could do it. At this point, we need to figure out if the shape is right, if we need to make any adjustments to this backside. And I think this is okay. Yeah, probably going to leave it like that. And of course, I mean, we can still manipulate stuff after the fact. Now, in order to fill this in, it gets a little tricky because we've got 1, 2, 3 edges on top. And this one doesn't count because it's going to be basically the left side of the edge. So really, we would need more divisions underneath this for it to work. We could add those now. It's probably best to add them now because it'll simplify the connection. If we don't, then it gets kind of tricky to fill this in. Now, we could use something like fill hole, for example, and we could do a fill star, which would leave the inside open and say keep creased edges, and then it would add a crease here, and it would stay how it is, and it would work okay. But that's not the best way. So I'm going to double click on this edge here. I'm going to go to insert edge. 50% of the way is going to be fine. That puts it right about there. Single is fine because we have symmetry. It's going to add them on both anyways. Then I'm going to take this edge, but I don't want to do anything down here really. Actually, you know what? How much room do we have with the subframe? Let's see. Yeah, we got a little bit of room. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that, we're going to pull that up a little bit. And I've mentioned this in tons of other videos. We don't want to just insert an edge and then leave it flat. That's not really great for the curvature because if it's just flat, we don't really need an edge there. Well, what we could do is create T-points or just insert a point on the end of that and kind of work with it. But again, in reality, we want to get, let's see, we might be too close to the subframe here. Remember that we're thickening outward, or that's the plan anyways. So that might work, but it's getting pretty close. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just pull that down a little bit. And then I am going to get off of that, pull this one down a little bit too. Yeah. I mean, because as we're looking at it, the bottom of that tube isn't in the scan there, but that section is, which tells me that this right here is likely going to be a problem. So I'm actually going to take both of these and pull the whole thing down. And that should still be fine. If we look at it in smooth display, it's going to be a pretty gradual transition. But we just want to make sure we've got enough room to clear that. We can, again, we can always come back later and move it, but if we can deal with these things now, it's good. All right, so that takes care of this pair of edges. It'll connect here. We still have to deal with this over here because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then if we connect these together, that will be 5 sides, and that's not ideal. So we want to add another edge down here. So double click, modify, insert edge. It's going to be on this side, roughly 50%. Again, it doesn't really matter at this point because we're doing a simple insertion. And then again, we don't want them flat. So I'm going to take that and just move it up a little bit and out a little bit. And then probably bring this one down to be more flat, not flat, but more flat. So now we got a very gradual transition undertail. If we want to, we could do more with it after the subframe. So basically from here, I could pull that point up as long as everything where the subframe is in this part, because that's really where the connection is. It's where the rider weight's going to be. It's going to attach from the bottom, the top, as well as the sides of the tank. So that's where we want all those connection points to be. Everything back is just aesthetic or aerodynamics. And if there needs to be any more structure, I can always add to that subframe. I still have, I don't know how many. I've got more of this DOM tubing laying around, even though I built the subframe probably before some of you were born. All right, looks pretty good. So very minor tweaks, very minor changes. All right, from the side, it's all looking pretty good. Okay. So now let's go ahead and connect this. I am going to do fill hole. And note that with fill hole reduce star, it appears to just connect everything how we want. And this is partially planning because we knew the number of divisions on the top side and we sort of mimic them on the bottom side. So it didn't really have any guesswork. So we can say, okay. And there are no creases. So if we take a look at this thing in smooth display, it just looks like a melted, I don't know, something. But that's okay. Now at this stage, what we want is to make sure that the shape is what we want. And I can tell you right now, it needs a little bit of adjustment. This set of edges needs to move this direction from the bottom. And then I'm going to take these two and move them up. And then maybe move this one back. It's tricky to figure out the orientation. If you want to, you can do a section view. But really, again, it comes down to, I'm going to have some scan stuff in the way. Really, it comes down to edge flow. So maybe this one kind of goes like that. So these two edges are somewhat parallel. These two are somewhat parallel. This one here, I have to decide if I want it to flare out. I think I do. I think I want it to come back a little bit like that. which means underneath we could make those go back. But I think that's okay. Once we get some control loops in here, it'll be a bit more clear. Let's go ahead and just take a quick look at it in smooth. Not that it's really going to do anything for us. Box display. And now at this point, you should be able to visualize what the final is going to look like. Now, of course, it's still in box display. There's still a lot of details that we need to add. But if it doesn't look right, if you squint your eyes and it doesn't look right, then you need to continue to work on the shape. So for example, this edge, and this edge kind of goes forward and down. This one here kind of goes straight forward. So if I wanted to make some adjustments, like bring this one down, now would be the time to do it. If I needed to make any adjustments to the seat pan area, so for example, if I want it to have a little bit of a crown on it and not be completely flat, then now is the time that we want to start to make these general changes. So this point here, pull that up, and then that point there, kind of pull that out, and then maybe this one out a little bit. And then on the top, again, we don't want anything to be flat. If it's flat, then there's really no need for those extra points. Kind of pull that up. And there we go. So now everything is okay. All right, so let's do another save. I'm going to go to a home view, and I want to save this. I really should save more often while doing these videos, but and honestly, doing any design work, it's pretty easy to get carried away. Fusion, I feel, does a pretty good job of auto-saving and caching to the point where you can get away with not saving for a long time. But because we're direct modeling, there is no history. So if you get to a point where you're maybe not sure how the design's going to progress, it's always a good idea to save it and maybe even put a comment. All right, so let's take a look at what we got before we get too far, because again, this is really the stage where we want to make big changes to the shape. Everything after here are going to be small refinements. So the edges where they are in this shape should be in the correct location. So assume that if we just took the box display and turned it smooth, anywhere that we've got, let's say this edge here, that's realistically, when you're looking at the side of your design, that's where that edge should be, or the reflections on it, for example. Same thing with this one here. This is really where that edge should be. And if those aren't correct, now is the time to fix it. So, for example, if we wanted to, let's see what we want to do. I think I want to take some of this stuff, again, after the subframe. I think I want to take some of that stuff up vertically. So I'm just going to use the vertical arrow, pull it up, probably a bit extreme. You can see the subframe popping through. So Control Z, and then maybe move that up 5 millimeters. All right, so that looks pretty good. So these are the kinds of changes you want to make. So look at your design from the top, make sure the shape matches what you would expect. Look at it from the side, the back, the front, different angles, and just kind of make sure that overall that shape works. All right, I'm happy with everything so far. So now let's start to talk about how we can control the edges. So with the edges, one of the things that makes this tricky, or at least trickier, is the fact that we have got sections of the side panel that don't connect on the top. So these two panels here don't connect on the top. And this one doesn't connect on the bottom, which means that when we insert edges, the corners are going to get tricky. I don't know how else to say it besides tricky. But basically, you generally want an edge to end. So like, this edge carrying along. you generally want it to end at this point. But what we actually need to do is create edge loops that go around, and then with those edge loops, control how tight the transitions are. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to note that even though we're going to thicken this outward, what we want to do is extend this lip on the top and raise it up, and that's where it's going to meet the tank. So this tells me that from the side, I want to lower this down a little bit. I need to give myself space to work, so I'm going to pull that down. And the end goal for this design is to have, on race bikes, typically have adhesive foam padding that will go on the tail section where you're sitting, put some on the back here, and probably put a little bit on the tank. Now, the OEM seat for this actually came up the tank about halfway and was probably somewhere up here, but I don't really want to build another one of those. I did build one for the first tail section I made, but for this one, I think I'm going to just go with the seat foam. A couple reasons. One is because the attitude of the bike has rotated and shifted quite a bit over the years, meaning originally the seat was quite a bit lower. And I'm tall, I'm 6'3", a little bit over 6'3", so I don't have any problem putting my feet down, but just in general, in terms of where you're sitting, if we put a thick seat on that was, even up to this line right here, that would be pretty tall. So I'm probably going to go with seat foam for a first iteration. If I don't like it, I can always cut up in the top and build a seat that attaches right to the subframe. Not a big deal. But right now, what we want to do is we're going to take this and we need to go all the way around. Remember, we're working across the midline, but we need to go all the way around. And we're going to add to it. So I'm going to use Alt on the keyboard and pull this up. This gets a little tricky, but what we want to do is try to keep this front edge in line. And this one here, I'm not too worried about just yet. We're going to have to go back and move it. But with this, remember, we're going to be thickening outward, but we still want to make sure we don't want it to be perfectly on the tank because we probably want a little bit of a gap, but we still want it to be relatively close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some adjustments and basically pull this in a little bit. This is going to be our mounting tab, so that's where the tail section is going to screw in, at least on that side. This upper edge probably is up too high, so let's bring that down. And then once we get into smooth display, we're going to have to massage this quite a bit more. But for right now, I think that's okay. Now, if we go into smooth display now, this, you can kind of see we're starting to control that extra edge loop there is starting to give us some more control. It's not going to do much until we add more edges, and you can see this opening here is problematic. Some of this stuff, when you think about the design process, some of the stuff you could overbuild and then trim it back in the solids workspace or this, the solid tools in the design workspace. If you want to do it like we're doing it here, where we're actually building everything in the form, it is a little bit more complicated, but I think it's good practice to try to work it out, at least with a design like this. So I think that's pretty good. In order to control that edge, so again, going to smooth display, in order to control that edge better, we're going to need a couple more divisions. And what I mean by that is this corner is going to need more vertical edges to help control it, but we're also going to need more divisions to go around to help prevent it from turning into this sort of melted mess, right? So the way that we do that is, let's go ahead and insert an edge. I'm just going to put it right in the middle. I'm going to use simple insertion because I'm still not set on the overall geometry. And now when I go into smooth display, you can see that it's keeping that upper edge a bit better. All right, so it's looking pretty good. We might have to divide this section up in order to control that area better. And just kind of looking at it, I think that's what I'm going to do. I don't want to use that. I want to use insert edge. All right, come on, Fusion. So let's go to insert edge, put it right there. This, it's gonna, a little foreshadowing, it's gonna get tricky or trickier to control the shape. So it's always a good idea when you start adding these extra edges in. Again, go back and think about the basic shape and don't start adding these edges until you're happy with it. Once you start adding the edges, we want to generally move them together as a group. So for example, because the sides are still relatively flat, we haven't added too much geometry to it yet. We're going to make sure that we move the entire edges together. That's going to be important. So when I look at this in smooth display, now it's controlling that. Again, don't worry too much about what's going on down here. We need to take care of that, but it's actually looking pretty close without doing too much. Another thing to consider is that the final tail section, we can put like a rubber piece of trim around it where it touches the tank. The factory ones, the place that I'm actually mounting to, there was a rubber bushing there, and that was part of the way that the panels were added so they didn't rattle. So this could have, this could have some sort of rubber trim on the inside of it. And basically what I'm looking at now is it looks pretty good. It's fairly consistent over here. It gets a bit tight around this corner, and then it opens up here. So because of that, I think I want to move these back. And probably from the side, just move it back a little bit. And when we do this from the side view, we do have to be careful because it's going to move it, basically it's going to move it straight back, and we need to move it back and at an angle a bit. All right, so I think that looks pretty good for now. Remember, again, we're thickening outward, so this is going to be the inside of our final surface. And we are going to be, so right now, all I'm really concerned with is this upper edge, because the secondary edge, this one here, I'm going to flare it out, and I'm going to add some more geometry to the design. But right now, really the main concern for this point in the design is this upper edge and making sure the upper edge matches the tank. That's the one I'm really concerned with right now. And we want to leave it alone, knowing that if we move anything, so if I move this edge, for example, it will have an impact on the shape, the transition going into that upper edge, but the upper edge itself is going to stay in the same place that we just put it. So that's okay. So what I want to do at this point is I want to start to control some other edges. We're going to come back and add more detail here, but I need to control some other edges. So like this one here that's going back in box display, that needs to be tighter, and because it rolls into this corner, it's going to impact this edge here. So I want to start to control this all the way to the back, this one, and then this one that goes up and over. And at the end, we'll come back and we'll take care of this edge here and then work on the shape of that panel. So this is kind of the direction I'm going. So getting it at the tank, making sure that part's right, and then begin working my way back. Now the trouble that we're going to have going here, because we've got a star point, the trouble that we're going to have here is when we insert edges. So for example, if I take these two edges here, and actually, you know what? Let me carry it. Now let's just carry it to there for right now. This will potentially highlight the problem. So when I insert an edge, I'm going to try to stay fairly consistent in terms of how far away we are. So let's just use a number. Let's say 0.08. I don't know if that's going to be a good number or not, but that's just what I'm going to use for now. So what happens here is we just created a T-point. So this is no longer four-sided technically, but it kind of is, because when T-points get added, especially in the simplified mode, this edge right here is still straight. So Fusion can take care of this okay. So if we go into the smooth display, the geometry in that corner, even though that's a star point, it's not horrible. But if we hide our edges, what you're going to start to see is that the geometry is going to get really tight in this corner. Now, since we're going to be thickening outward, it's actually going to be, it would be fine because the radius of that corner would get larger. So in our case, that'd be okay. If we were trying to thicken inward, that's where we would start to have a problem. Another quick note that we need to consider is we see an edge right here. When we look at the reflection, don't worry about this one because we need to deal with this edge transition here. But this one right here, if we rotate this around, we start to see a little ripple there, a little wrinkle. And the reason for that is because of that star point. And that's why I said inserting that edge is going to sort of highlight this problem because these are now sort of fighting for curvature here. And the way that we need to get around this is I'm going to take this edge, I'm going to go to Insert Edge, and it's probably going to be really mad at me for doing this, but basically if we were going to use Insert Edge and we selected both of these, even if we use 0.08, the endpoints are not going to connect. So generally what I do is I'll add an edge, the offset distance I want. So for example, 0.8 back here. I'm going to do both using that same value and say okay. And what this is going to do is it'll insert edges where I told it to, 0.08 or 8% of the way from the selected edge to the next edge. And this is why the numbers are they're hard to use because it's not an actual number. It's basically a ratio or percentage. So this means that if this edge right here is longer than the one going toward the midline, that edge is going to be further that direction than the one that we put here. So this is why just picking a number like 0.8, the number itself, it doesn't necessarily mean the transition is going to be consistent in both directions. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to Insert Point. We're going to go from there up to here. Say okay. Again, I'm still in simple insertion mode. I'm going to go back and massage all of these corners when we're done. But for right now, I want to keep them in this sort of simplified version. And basically what I mean by that is I don't want to deal with, some of the extra stuff that we have to deal with when we come to like fixing these corners. So we're going to repeat this process. Notice that I have not gone into smooth display for good reason because it's going to look pretty messy. And for this front edge here, I'm going to just use Insert Point. And I'm going to go visually, so if I go to the middle here, for example, it's going to take care of the other side because of our symmetry. So I don't need to go straight across. If I happen to go straight across and the edges didn't end up in the same spot, it's actually okay. Fusion would just massage it a little bit and get it right. So now we're going to connect those. The one on the top is a little tricky. I'm going to go ahead and connect it. We haven't done anything with it on the back, but I need to connect it there. And then I'm going to repeat that, and we're going to go from here to here. This one probably is going to need a little bit of work. Let's go ahead. I can hide the scan. We don't need to see the scan right now. So because I went straight across, that one there is less than ideal. So to fix this, I probably, instead of moving that, because again, everything's simple insertion mode, so everything is still flat, what I would probably do is from this top-down view, I would go there, and then I would select and delete those. Make sure it's just the edges. Grab that and hit delete. And then that way that goes straight across. It doesn't have to go straight across, but for right now, I think that's what I want to do. All right. So we still have to carry this edge down. And I think, at least for right now, and we can always change our mind later and remove some of these, I think I'm going to carry it down to that edge, which again is going to create a T-point down here, but we're going to come back up. Looks like I accidentally deleted some stuff under here. That's okay. We'll just use fill hole. And with the reduced star, it should just take care of it for us. All right, so we brought that one down. We're going to have to carry this edge forward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Insert Edge. I'll use that same 0.08. And then I'm going to do the same thing back here. I'll go to there, Insert Edge. Let's do single. We will have to add an edge up top, but we're going to do that afterwards. And then let me take this one. and I want it to go the other direction, so I'm going to just put -08, and then we'll connect it together. You might be thinking, if you've watched enough of the form videos that we've done on this channel, you might be thinking, why am I not using bevel? Like, I use bevel everywhere else to kind of control these edges. Why am I not doing it here? Well, the simple answer to that is because we're running into a star point here. We're running into a corner transition here. We're running into a star point here. And because of all of these things, what ends up happening with bevel is it's going to mess up the corner, and then we're going to have to come back and like weld edges together. It looks like that because I used both on that one. I'm going to go ahead and delete that edge. But basically what happens is these intersections get really messed up. So bevel, while it's a great tool, it has a lot of great applications. In this case, it would just make more work for us. So that's why I'm not using it. All right. Now, obviously, we haven't finished everything, but I'm going to just take a reluctant peek at smooth display and hide the edges. And you can kind of see what we got going on. So we still need to deal with this corner a bit. We still need to deal with stuff that's going on in this corner. These transitions we're going to have to kind of work on a bit. And of course, we're going to deal with the bottom edge and carry it forward and work on those controls. Again, this right here is probably just a sucky transition. It's not great, but we can add additional edges to carry them and control that. But overall, starting to see that we've got these, these tighter transitions here. Now, if you're thinking that is way too tight for what I want to do, that's okay. We can handle that. So what we're probably going to end up doing, looking at this, is we'll probably flatten. So this edge right here will carry on and build out the edge that goes on top here. It's going to take a little bit of work in this corner. And in terms of getting these like these edges to be not as tight, we can always move the edges using slide. So that'll allow us to smooth it out. And generally, after I get the tight edges done, I'll use make uniform, which is going to sort of move all of them anyways and see how it looks. And then I'll go and refine it from there. So let's kind of forget about this front for right now. And let's work on just getting this the transition of sort of the upper portion. So we need to add edges in here, and those are going to carry across, and then we need to add edges down here. So I'm gonna do this first in this section. So once again, insert edge using that same 08. That's going to be fine. And then here's where we really need to work through what's going to happen. I want to connect these two together. So insert point, I'm going to go from here to here. And what that's going to do is it's going to wrap up and over this corner. And this makes some interesting stuff happen in this corner, right? So we've got this triangle, which is generally not good because triangles are going to be flat, and it's right next to a star point, which means that it's going to be pulling on this. So really what we want is for this portion of the seat transition to blend to flat, to basically carry this forward and get rid of all the stuff that's happening in that corner. It's easier said than done, but that's sort of the game plan. All right, so to make that happen, I'm going to first start by deleting this edge and deleting this edge. And you can see what instantly happens. It kind of goes a bit crazy and raises up there. So let's go ahead and put this edge back in. And you might be thinking, why did I delete it then put it back in? Well, the reason for that is simply because when you delete it and put it back in, it's now flat. So if I undo a couple of steps, sometimes, like in this case, it's fairly flat anyways, but sometimes what ends up happening is you've got, so for example, these two edges here. If I delete both of those and say delete and then reconnect them back, a lot of times that'll just flatten itself out. So that's why we sometimes do that way. We delete those edges. So I'm going to delete that one again. And this T point here really needs to be flat. So what I'm going to do is delete that edge. And then I'm going to insert a point from here back to the midpoint and say, okay. This one probably needs to move down a bit, which again messes that T-point up. So again, to fix it, delete that edge, insert point, back to the mid, say, okay. I'm going to take a quick look at smooth display and hide the edges. All right, so it's getting a bit better. I'm going to go back to box display. All right, so I think I want to, let's take these edges down a little bit. Let's bring that down. Actually, you know what? No, let's undo. Yeah, I'll leave that like that. All right. All right, let's go ahead and before we get into cleaning this up anymore, let's go ahead and add the edges that we need in here. And I'm going to double click and that goes the whole loop, which I don't want. I want to go from here, control double click to there. All right, and in this case, we could use bevel, but I'm still going to use insert edge. I'm going to do both, say okay, and just take a quick look at it. All right, control 4. All right. Again, transition's still a bit too tight. Don't worry about the back rolling under yet, but transition's still a bit too tight, but the edge flow is what we're looking for. So that looks good. And I'll go back to this. And basically the next step in this process is to try to get this star point to be further up away from all the transitionings that's happening here. So that star point right now is something that we want to move at least one additional edge away. So that tells me that I need to add more edges. Let's do insert point. So I'm going to come from the middle here down, and I'm just going to bring it forward to the middle of the seat pan. So this is going to be a T-point on both sides. And again, it's symmetric, so it's going to add it automatically for us. Just going to go ahead and let it crank away. Now remember, when you're adding a T-point like this, if the edge exists already and we use simple insertion mode, it's not going to do any sort of crazy geometry changes to it, and that's fine. But really, we need to be careful. Like, for example, this T-point here, I'm okay with that one because I know, or at least I believe, I'm going to divide this thing up in the middle some more. So just a quick look, make sure nothing too crazy has happened. And then let's go ahead. Let me click on that. And I'm going to insert a single edge. This time I'm going to use exact insertion mode because I don't want to change the shape, and you can see what happens. It does all these sort of crazy subdivisions to make that work because of everything else that's going on. So Control Z, undo, insert edge, back to simple insertion mode, about halfway. We're going to have to tweak that shape, but it's okay. For the most part, it looks okay. All right, so now let's see what we can do about getting this star point up and away. So I'm going to get rid of that edge right there. And I'm going to get rid of that one, but then I'm going to reconnect it. So let's go to there. Nah, it's not going to look good. Yeah, let's do, what can we do here? Let's get rid of all these. Get rid of that one, and let's just take a look. All right, that looks a lot better. So Control 4. Yeah, so I like that transition better there. It's a lot smoother. This is still too tight, and there's a star point there. That would be great if we could move it further away. I think that's going to be a little tricky, but let's go ahead and make some general adjustments because we don't want all these edges to be flat. So we'll pull that out a little bit, Maybe pull that up a little bit. And let's take these three and just pull them out a little bit. All right. So now is the time where we're going to start to do some manual adjustment to tweak the shape. So I want a much more general transition on this edge. So I'm going to pull these out, pull this one out. Now remember, when you're working in top-down mode and we're moving them in plane, which means if it's an extreme angle, then we're going to start to create a transition there. So that could be bad. It could be something you don't want. Now this other one here, it runs all the way forward. I'm going to use slide edge. And I'm going to slide that down just a little bit. Say OK. And then take a look at smooth display. All right, so still have a fairly tight transition there. Remember, when we thicken this outward, that's going to get a larger radius on it. So this is the inside that we're working on. This needs some work. We'll take care of that. But you can see that we've got a fairly nice transition. If we want it to be smoother, then we just simply need to move those edges further away. The star point I still really don't like. I'm going to go ahead and use make uniform now and just take a look. So you see how it moved everything? It moved that star point for us and made it look quite a bit better. And that looks okay. All right, so the next thing I want to do is clean up this transition. I don't want it to be a real tight transition here. That should be relatively smooth, but I want it to be tighter back here. Not tighter than it is, but just tighter in general. So in box display, in order to keep this one a tighter transition, we would want to make sure that these edges don't move too far. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to try this, and I don't know if it's going to work or not. Do I want to go all the way with that? I'm going to try this and probably undo it. I'm going to hit delete and then take a look at this in smooth display. Hide the edges. So I still got that transition. The back is going to need some work, but I still have that transition. And it's fairly gradual. It's probably too much. All right, so I'm going to do Control Z. And the main thing that I probably want to do is, let's go back to box display, is move this edge further away. And slide edge, let's pull that away a bit. Go to our make uniform, and make some minor adjustments. All right, so we still got that transition. Again, don't pay close attention to the back kind of melting. We haven't added the control loop on the back yet. But until we get all the rest of this sorted, it's not worth adding those because we're just going to have to move everything else around. All right, so that looks pretty good. That edge is pretty good. We haven't done anything with the bottom yet. It's still pretty soft, but that's okay for right now. If we want to soften this one up a bit, we need to move it. But let's go ahead and let's soften the upper edges and get rid of this crease that's going on here because we want that to be a bit smoother. All right, so in order to make these transitions, let's see, how do we want to do this? In order to make this transition flatter, we can carry the edge loop to somewhere, let's just say here, to this point, make a T-point here and get rid of this loop completely in the middle. That's one option. Another option is to try to stretch these out. So I think what I want to do is this edge here, I am going to go to insert point and I'm going to bring it down right there. And once it creates that, we can delete the one that was there originally. So what this is going to do is twofold, and we're going to do this a couple of times. One, it's going to carry the flow of that edge. Instead of going up here, it's going to carry it down. This is a T-point right now because this edge, and I'm having to move the cursor up and down because it's still thinking, but this edge right here is straight. So it shouldn't really change the overall curvature that we're dealing with. It'll just kind of smooth it out for us. So double click that, hit delete. We're going to do the same thing here, insert point. And now here's the trick that is going to help us. So right now, where this edge is going, there is an angle change, which in all my videos I say is a good thing. However, in this case, what we actually want is for it to be no change in angle. We want it to be smooth. So by adding this new insert point, what this is going to do is it's going to create, or it's going to leave that midline straight where we just added the point, and then we can take the original edge, which has this transition here, and we can delete it, which means that on the side of the top portion, it's going to keep the sort of the curvature, the edge that we've got, that flowing line that we want. But on the front, where the back of the rider is going to be, where you're sitting on this, we want to get rid of that and keep it smooth. In reality, does it matter? Probably not, because again, there'll be some seat foam in this area. But in order to really have full control over the design, this is what we want to play around with. So now, Control 4, it's starting to smooth it out. There's still an edge there we can play around with. It's starting to smooth it out. This right here, I think that looks good, but maybe as we get closer, I want to change that transition a little bit. All right. All right, let's go ahead and let's round the top off. Let's play with the top more, and then we can come back and do some more tweaking in this area if we need to. I think what's going to end up happening is this edge at the back is going to stay where it is, and then we'll probably start to transition it up vertically and carry this over and then get rid of the stuff in the middle. I don't quite know yet. But now I want to take this edge and let's use slide edge. Where is it at? Let's pull this down a bit. The top is going to be trickier because of this triangle section. Again, generally triangles are bad. We don't really want that. But in this case, we're going to leave it for right now, and we'll deal with it in a second. Anytime we have a change in direction, we're either going to end up creating a triangle, an n-gon, some star points. Something is going to happen when you change the direction of flow. So for example, the top is coming over and down, so that's 4 sides, that's 4 sides, that's 4. This is coming around the side, so that stays 4. But connecting them together, there's going to have to be some sort of agreement to make that work. Now we can do all kinds of things like add T-points and control the flow on the inside, but for right now, let's just go ahead. Let's try to slide this edge. Again, pull that out. And let's take a look at smooth display. All right, so I think it's looking pretty good. This may still be a bit tighter of a transition than I'm hoping for, but how can we control that? All right, I think I know what I want to do here. I think that I want to get rid of the triangle. I know that much. And I want to, let's see how we can do this. Let's try something. Let's do weld vertices. And what I want is this edge to transition into this quad right here. So merge those two together. And then get rid of this extra piece altogether. All right, waiting, thinking. All right, so let's take that and delete it. All right, so now we've got a quad there coming in. We got a quad here. Let's take a look at it in smooth display and Control 4. All right, so that's better. I think that's better in that corner. Could use a little bit more work. Maybe the transition is a little tight, but I think it's a much better solution than actually having a triangle there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this and maybe move this one. So what this is doing, by widening this, what we're doing is we're making the transition more gradual, right? So I'm going to take this edge, pull it back, and then smooth display. See it, we're kind of rounding that off. All right, another thing I think I want to do, and I'm not sure if it's going to work or not, but let's try it. Another thing I think I want to do is end these. I don't want them to go across. So I'm thinking about maybe just having these three end and then maybe carry this one across. So what that looks like is if we delete, let's get rid of that and hit delete. We need these two as well. Hit delete. Probably need something to control that, but let's see what this looks like in smooth display. All right, so that keeps this face pretty smooth. Still carries the edge, right? And it still looks pretty good. Okay. So I think that's the solution there. Let's go back to box display. Now this edge right here is pretty bad. Really what we want is this to be a straight line. And I'm going to have to make some tweaks. Let's go ahead and let's just make some adjustments. So what I'm looking for with this is I'm looking to keep the lines a consistent width. I don't want to have it be wide down here and then get narrow. And then I need this to be a straight line. And so in order for that to happen, I need to delete the edge in the middle, which makes this a straight line now. This isn't a straight line. I'm going to have to live with that a little bit, unfortunately. But then I want to just bring this back. I'm going to take it to the middle and say, okay. So we still have a straight line here, which is good because we have a T point, and that's what we want. This, in reality, should probably be straight, but I think I would lose a little bit too much of the shape. So I'm going to have to deal with that. But basically what we were trying to do is carry this edge back, but have it disappear as it comes up here. And again, we can use utilities, make uniform, and basically have it stretch things out a bit. Now from the side, I'm going to go back to my box display. From the side, I think that I want this to be narrower on top. And I've already started adding a ton of edges, which makes it more complicated, but we haven't carried them around the back yet, which is good. Because really what that means is I can take these edges and faces and I can pull them down and make this narrower. You do want to be mindful of what you're changing, but I want it to be a little bit more sleek. So let's see, no tail. And so if we take a look at the tail section, so you can see it's pretty narrow in the back. It's pretty narrow up front. Right now, in smooth display, we're sitting a bit high up front. So what I want to do is I want to get the front down and probably this section too. I just want to take the whole thing down to about there. Yeah, I think that's probably better. Yeah, it's a bit closer. All right, that back section, let's go to box display. The back section here can go up. And maybe these here can go up and back. And again, this is why we don't want to add too many edges too soon, because it makes like little tweaks like this much more difficult. But I think overall, let's go back to smooth display. Overall, that's looking pretty good. This right here, that back edge, once we start to add control loops, will stay a bit tighter. But I really want to stick with that shape. So that looks pretty good. All right, back in box display. Let's go ahead and let's do another save. All right. I don't think we need this edge anymore. Go ahead and get rid of that. And let's see. Yeah, until we take care of the control on the back. I think we're just going to have the back's not going to look very good. Now is a good time to let's make some tweaks and adjustments back here. So, so for example, what we're looking for here, again, is the flow of edges. So for example, these two are tapering and they're getting narrower, but we don't want them to be, basically too different from each other. Like we don't want to, let's see what this point is. We don't want to introduce like geometry changes just for the sake of geometry changes. So we either want them to stay somewhat parallel, be slowly tapering toward convergence or tapering away when we're looking at like the backside of that. And similar to the top, so like this edge right, or this point right here, pull that in. This stuff here, make it a bit more gradual. The inside, again, the inside's still pretty tricky because we don't have control loops on the back. So I'm not too worried about that yet. But what's going to end up happening, just like we did for the seat section, is we're going to end up carrying this around to control the back. We still have to control this bottom edge, and we've also got to add some more control for the sides here and actually give it some shape. So this side section isn't going to just be flat. It is going to have some shape to it. But this is a good place. Let's go ahead and just fit to screen. That's a good place to save, because I know this video is getting pretty long and we're well over an hour at this point. So that's a good place for us to save and just make sure that we're happy with where everything is right now. I can just, looking at it, I can see a few things that I want to tweak. So for example, this edge to here, I'm happy with everything until right there. I think that needs to come up a bit. So it needs to be, visually, it needs to be narrowing. So I know that I need to make that tweak. And until we have control over this bottom edge and add some more detail to the side panel section where it's on the sides of the gas tank, we're not going to get a good sense of the final shape. But a great place to make sure that everything you've done is saved, and just to kind of do a quick recap of everything we've done to make sure that we were okay with all the steps so far. Everything else that we're going to do is just more repetition of the same. It's just practice. So with any design like this, whether it's a tail section or a fender or just some part, we need to start out with the fewest number of faces possible and keep it as simple as possible, working in box display until we're ready to make that next step. And the next step of that is generally going to be adding more edges to control the transitions and the flow. So for example, in smooth display, this edge now runs, basically from where it comes off the tank and runs all the way back to the tail. And that's good. If I hide the edges, you can see that's where the shadow transitions, right? We probably need to soften this a little bit more. It's pretty tight, but again, when we thicken it outward, it's going to get larger, so it may possibly be okay. The back rolling under, we still need to control that. Don't worry too much about that. I don't want to do that until the end or further to the end when we have this bottom edge transition taken care of. Right now, it's a bit too soon. And this is partially because this edge ends up, we have to do a couple of things to make this work. So we got to deal with that. But overall, the shape of it is looking pretty good at this stage. And you should be happy with it in box display. This is really the goal, is make sure that you're happy with the shape in box display. And again, a good sort of rule of thumb is to just kind of squint a little bit and make it so you don't see all of those details. And then you get an idea of what that final visualization would be. So general process, it's common for no matter what you're designing, whether it's a game controller or a motorcycle or a car or some other product, the process is the same. Fewest number of faces possible, get the rough shape, happy with it in box display, then begin adding more detail, controlling the edges with how it's going to look in smooth display. The tighter the extra edges are together, the tighter the transition will be. The further apart they are, the more gradual it'll be. And you can use tools like Bevel Edge. Bevel Edge is a great tool. I use it all the time. However, when it ends in the middle of another edge or when it ends at a star point, those are the times when bevel really just makes the process a bit more complicated than it needs to be. If your edge goes completely around something, then bevel is a great tool. But if it doesn't, then you can start to run into a problem. Like I could have used bevel here, probably been okay. But the problem with that is I don't really need extra edges on the bottom, which means that probably around here, we're going to end up with a T point. But until we add control loops for all the shape on the back, then there's really no point in carrying it over. So I'm going to make that, as I mentioned, that one tweak that's kind of bugging me, and that's pulling this up. And again, the reason for that is visually, I think it should either, like from here, it's fairly straight. It narrows, then gets wider, and then narrows again. And if it gets wider at the back of the bike, it just doesn't really work. So that's why I did that. All right, one last save, and then we'll move on to adding some more detail. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is we are going to divide up this bottom edge, and we're going to have to be creative because we need to carry some of that edge forward and then up. So very similar to what we did with this back piece, we're going to just have to see how the edges flow and then play around with it. I can tell you, looking at the tail section right now, so for example, this is basically straight and this is down. And if we want to round this off a bit more, I think before I go too much further, what I'm going to do is take these edges, because we haven't divided the back up yet, now is a good time to do it. And probably leave this one because it ends at that star point, and just go ahead and rotate it a little bit and move them down and in, and then take a look at it in smooth display. So the main thing when we're doing this, it can be very hard to visualize, but the main thing that you want to look at or think about is the highlights, the reflections, the shadows. So you can see this is a very good shadow or reflection spot there and there. With those highlights are going to be kind of what we're looking for. This, I'm not really happy with that transition there. There's like a bump. So I'm going to have to take care of that. I'm going to wait to take care of that until we divide the bottom edge up though, because basically part of the problem is this doesn't go all the way around, and we're going to have to address that, either turn it into a T point, maybe somewhere up here, or potentially carry it all the way under. All right, so what's the next step? Well, I'm going to double click on this edge, which is going to stop right here. We're going to use insert edge. And again, with insert edge versus using something like bevel, when it ends at a star point or it doesn't end completely at the end of the model, bevel does some weird stuff. And maybe it's just best that we take a look at what it does instead of me just keep saying it does weird stuff. So you can see here it even gives us an error, cannot do selected bevel edge. And basically what happens is because this edge goes away and then it builds these other edges here. And even if we do things like increase the crown to as high as it'll go, we are not going to be able to still stay connected to that edge. So again, bevel has its limitations based on what the geometry is. And if you can use it, it's a great tool because it keeps us from having to do things like manually move these edges down to smooth it out. But for this edge, we have to do it manually. So I'm going to try a single edge. I don't know what I'm going to need to do on the bottom, even though I have modeled this before. Every time we go into a freeform model, it's not going to be identical, especially something like this. We're going to have to just address the problems as they come up. So with that edge, I now want to carry it forward. We're going to do insert point and basically try to pick about where it would hit and go there. On the front edge, I'm going to do insert edge. And again, we want to do, so remember the 0.08 is 80 or 8% of the way. So because this distance is so much longer, you can see where it's putting that edge. It's fine. 0.083, it's going to be fine. It's all right for what we're doing. We are likely going to end up dividing this up more, but for right now, I think that's okay. And remember when we first started, this was the first edge we dealt with, and I mentioned that we were going to move some of this outward because basically we want this to kind of bulge or flare out from the tank, because the tank itself, from where that lip is, flares out and then is rounded. So what we want to do is go from our edge that we created, which we may end up pushing in and down a bit more. But what we want to do is we want to go from the edge we created and then sort of come outward. So this is a good point in time for me to take that edge and I'm going to pull it down. Yeah, we'll do that. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to double click this edge and I'm going to delete it for right now. I know we added it to help control the tangency in those areas, but for right now, we don't need it because of the other stuff that we have going on. It's going to be, this edge will help keep it up and some other stuff will help keep it up. So now I want to take, let's take these three and let's move them outward. So again, what we want to do is we want to go from our edge, which is going to be a bit inward. So let's come back to here. And then let's take a look at smooth display. So really smooth display is, in this case, is where we need it to match the tank. So it's one of the cases where I think going and using smooth display is okay. I'm going to take these two end ones and move them in a little bit. And then maybe take this and move it out. Go ahead and pull that one out. And you can see that it's pretty far away back here. And I want it to be a bit closer there, but I need to be very careful not to get carried away doing this in smooth display. So what I want to do is I want to take both of these and pull, let's go ahead and pull this forward as well. Pull that forward. And then take a look in smooth display. Because again, if we just take this point and bring that forward, yeah, that's okay. Not generally what we would want to do. So I'm going to select this face just to give you an idea of the differences between smooth display and box display. That face right there in box display is tiny, and in smooth display, basically it's stretched out pretty far. So as soon as we add maybe a little bit more control to it, it'll be closer to this final shape, but for right now, they're very different. I'm gonna take this, kind of move it up a little bit, move that up. Forms, like we can get some shapes pretty quickly, but forms is definitely a game of fine control and finesse on these models. It definitely takes a bit of time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these and move them outward. So basically flare that out like that. And then let's look at the bottom. Go ahead and select this. I don't really need to see the scan right now, it's just kind of getting in the way. And let's maybe take out to here and we'll pull those out as well. We're going to do some more work to this, but right now what I'm trying to avoid is this just being a flat side. And if we bring the scan back, I also want the front lip of this to roll forward, which is probably indicating that we need another control loop, probably from here, or we could try to extrude this forward. Gets a bit tricky just because there's nothing to connect to, but for right now, this is a good basic shape for us. And you can see how it transitions back here now that we've added that extra little control. That is not bad. I probably want to add a little bit more, maybe a section that raises up over here, but for the most part, that looks pretty good. We need to round the corner off down here, which means, again, additional control loops. So one thing to kind of consider, it's probably not very apparent when we're looking at this, but the edges are creased. If we go to a vertex selection, you'll notice some extra points pop up. So these points right here, for example, if I move that, what I'm doing is I'm controlling tangency basically right at the edge because there's not an additional face to control what happens there. So you can actually have the ability to control the tangency at the edge of these individual vertices. You have to select the red points. So like, for example, that one there. And then we could move that one out. And you could play around with this. It's, in my opinion, it's not a great way for a complex model like this. If you're doing something that is maybe a plastic part that has a parting line, that could be very helpful. But this really messes up the rest of the flow of the edges that we're working on. So what I'm going to do is use this link tangent, little chain link icon. It's going to reset that handle. I'll go to this one and reset it and then go back to my all selection. So those only show up when you have the vertex only selection. If you're using edges, faces, or the all selection, they won't show up. But it's just to kind of point out that the edges are creased and the tangency is going to be basically along this edge. It's not controlled by anything else. So right now, looking at this, go back in box display mode. I'm going to hide the tank. So looking at this, as I'm trying to decide what to do next, I need to think about the flow of these edges and the transition that's going to happen in this corner. So what I'm considering here is adding another edge loop right there below it that would let me control that transition a bit more. Before I do that, however, I think it's important because this is, essentially a sharp corner. I think it's important that we just make a minor change to it, kind of pull it out and up. And with it selected, I'll go to insert edge. I'm going to put it at about 50% instead of the 08. I'm going to put it right about in the middle. And then I'll take this edge and move it out. When you do something like this, moving an entire edge, keep in mind you are likely going to have to do some work on the back side of this model because we're probably messing things up. But right now, my main concern is this section transitioning back into the rest of it. So if I use smooth display, Control 4 to hide the edges, kind of see what we're working with. So that's a pretty nice edge. Again, we're going to take care of this. Don't worry about that right now. But that's a pretty good edge. And the last thing I really want to happen here, again, we messed the back up. Don't worry about it. We're going to fix it. That's why I leave the back until the very end, because once we have all the edges that flow from front to back, then we can deal with the back edge. So the last thing, or not the last thing, but the main extra thing that we want to do here is we want the front of this to roll forward, which means that we're going to need another edge loop or some extra edges up front. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to double click this and I'm going to insert an edge about 50% of the way, maybe right there. Say okay. All right, so let's see. I think, so this edge, when we look at a change in direction for the freeform edges, that's where we typically get into trouble. So like right here, I think what's best is to think about this being a full transition. And what I mean by that is, so if we look at maybe this edge here, let's go ahead and come down. And do we need an extra one down here? Maybe I'll come down to this. So basically what we want to do is we want to think about that as an edge. So if I try to move this out, for example, and we go ahead and bring this along with it, to sort of bump that out. And then this one is going to, so basically, let's see here. I'm trying to find a good way to describe this, but essentially what we want to do is we want to take this edge, I'm going to hold down Alt, I'm going to extrude it down, let go of Alt, extrude it down, let go of Alt again, down one more time, and then we'll come back and we'll clean up the bottom in just a minute. So we're going to use weld vertices. I'm going to stick that one on there. This is kind of out in space. That's going to cross itself, so I need to move this actually. I need to move it back that way. And this way. Let's go ahead and pull that down. All right. So now it's a bit closer. Let's go ahead and do weld vertices. And we'll weld that one to here. And then let's try this. Don't know how that's going to work. But basically what I did was I made this a quad at the bottom. So if let's look at it from the front. And we'll pull that one up. So basically what we're trying to do is turn this bottom section here. We want to get it to roll and change directions as if it's a single face. So it's going to take a little bit of tweaking, and these details are the really hard part, and usually where most of the questions I get come from. So that's why I am not going to speed through this part. I'm going to try to take my time, and we'll just make some adjustments here. Pull that back. And after I get it roughly right, I'm going to do some cleanup. But essentially, I'm going to take a quick look in Smooth Display. Essentially what we're doing is, so we're trying to create that rounded corner and keep this four-sided and basically treat it as if this is going to go up and wrap around. And then the same thing at the top. It kind of goes up and wraps back around. So again, this kind of thing is pretty hard to visualize, and it takes just playing around and getting comfortable with these form tools. So I'm going to, we know basically where the tank is. So I don't want to I don't want to do too much here. But again, we're trying to get that sort of bulged out shape. And we don't want this to be too narrow either. So let's pull that out a bit. Rotate this around. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to be looking at what I modified here. So what I'm looking at is this. Let's see if we can get a good view on it. This edge here and this edge here, I want the angles to be roughly the same. And what I mean by that is the angle between this and that. I want those to be roughly the same, which means that this one, and we'll take this one, have to come up a bit. And let's take a look. So if we bring the tank back, look at it from the side, could probably come forward a little bit. You can see it's just behind it, but I want to keep the bottom is pretty good. I like the bottom here. The top, I think, is a bit too crunched up, so I need to space it out a bit. So, but this is the idea here. And you can kind of see the bottom, we really added a lot of extra divisions to get it to change that, to sort of change direction. At the top, we don't really have those extra divisions. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to do insert point. I'm going to go to the middle here. And I'm going to stop here. That is going to be a T point. And as long as we don't edit this edge, as long as that edge stays straight, then the stuff over here we can move as much as we want and get that smooth transition. But the main reason for that division there is because we don't want this sharp corner. We want it to be able to pull out a little bit and be not perfectly round, like not a huge arc there, but more consistent than that tight transition that we had. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to take these three forward, go to a side view, and come in here. I'm going to take these three forward just a bit, and I'm going to pull them down slightly. And then I'm going to pull this one down and back and take a look at it in Smooth Display. So you can see we're getting a rounder edge. I want I want it to be closer to what this edge or this corner is. Remember, it doesn't have to be a straight line or it doesn't have to be hard edged. Really, we want to mimic the shadows, the reflections, the transitions. So seeing this edge on the tank and then seeing sort of a mimicked edge here is exactly what we're going for. One thing I noticed is that it's pretty tight at the top and it kind of looks a bit softer as it transitions down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with it just a bit more. And the reason for that is because this section right, that's wider than it is down here. So if we want to keep these consistent, we want to make sure that they're either gradual transitions. And what I mean by that is it's slightly tapering or slowly tapering, or that it stays parallel. So let's go ahead and move that in a bit. And again, Control 4, Control 6 to bring the edges back, and then back to box display. Also, let's note that maybe pulling this forward a bit, pulling that up, and maybe this one a bit more forward, so we can make this transition a little bit smoother on the bottom. Go ahead and pull that up and pull that out, and then take a look at it in smooth display. So I think this looks really good. What I'm seeing here is that the highlights for the shadows are very crisp on the front edge, and they get softer on the bottom. And that's not a bad thing. And of course, the direction of light matters. Up here, it's still probably a little tight for my liking. This doesn't look very consistent. So what I'm going to do is I want to, let's see, maybe pull this one down to start that transition earlier, and then maybe take this entire edge down to here and pull it forward. And then I can take this entire edge down to here, pull that one forward a bit, and then just do some very subtle changes up here. And then if we pull this one forward, that should soften it up as well. All right. So that looks like it lines up pretty well. Everything's transitioning back. I'm happy with all of that. And now we can go ahead and deal with this sort of corner that we've got. So a couple of things to note. One is, do we need this edge at all? We do need one of them. This one goes all the way around already. This one stops here. Again, it creates a T-point, but that makes this face, this little thin section here, that means that this edge and this edge are controlling the curvature there. And what I would want to do is just test it out by deleting those and then taking a look at it in smooth display. So now that transition is good. The side is smooth. I don't have that pinch anymore. And it didn't really mess anything else up. The bottom edge we could possibly make a bit softer. We could possibly make that a bit softer. I mean, this is an 80s bike, but it doesn't have hard lines. So when I look at something like this, the tank, basically the intensity of the transition on the tank, is what I want to mimic. So as I rotate this around, basically this sort of stylized line, that's what I'm looking to create. So let's do a little bit more tweaking on this, go back to box display. And then this means that we need to space the edges out or potentially flatten some of the stuff on the inside. And what I mean by that is if we take this edge here and we're going to pull it in, not so that it's a straight line from this upper section to the bottom, but if we put less of an extreme angle in this corner, that means that as it's controlling the curvature, it won't try to like stuff the surface into that corner very far. Again, we're letting Fusion do its little thinking here. All right, so keep in mind, I'm not touching this edge because it terminates up here and I don't want to mess that up. So I'm really starting here. I'm going to pull that down and inward. And then on the back side, this is already pretty flat here. It actually goes a bit concave. So maybe pull that out and then take a look at it. Control 4 to hide the edges. All right, so that looks pretty smooth. Control 6. And then if we want to actually loosen it up a bit more, what we could do is we could use slide edge and move some of those edges down, or we could use insert point, add a new edge that's further away. Keeping in mind that at this stage in the game, we need to be very, very careful how aggressively we're moving things. Because we're past the point of just a handful of faces making the initial shape. We're now to the point of going from, I don't know, 15 or 20 faces to now we've got, probably 100 different faces on this model. So we need to make minute changes and we need to be really clear and understand what we're moving and make sure that we play around with undo if we need to. So I'm going to select a couple of these edges and I'm going to try to pull them down. I'm going to say, okay. Take a look at this in smooth display. And then I'm going to go to utilities, make uniform, which is going to kind of redistribute those edges. And that looks pretty smooth to me. So we've got a nice transition. Gets a bit tighter up front, but we have a pretty nice transition there. So I'm going to go Control 6. And if we want to adjust it at the tank, my suggestion there is we don't have really a whole lot we can do at this corner unless we add an extra edge loop. So if we look at this in smooth display, basically what that means is we would need to add another control loop either from here back to make that transition a bit softer, or we can live with this. So if you want to make it softer, what I would say is that we could carry this edge, let's say back to there, and maybe let's go to there. And then what we'll do is we'll take maybe from right there, we'll take that and we'll pull that out ever so slightly. Again, we're not touching the T-point back here. We don't want to mess with that. But if we take a look, we've now softened that up a bit. It's a little more round. And the highlights, again, visually what we want is we want that to look straight and we want it to match the tank, which it is. And then we want it to transition visually into the rest of the shape. So I think that looks pretty good. All right, so Control 6, Alt and 1. We're getting pretty close. Not too much more to do except for deal with the back end. So now that we've got all these edges, we need to go ahead and fix a few things that got moved around. So I'm going to take these and kind of move them inward. And look at everything else. Yeah, that's okay. All right, so a couple of schools of thought here. Really, there's a lot of edges terminating here, and they're not all traditional T-points because of essentially because of the fact that this is not collinear with this. So the first thing that I would try in order to do this is I double-click this edge, see where it stops, shift, double-click until we go all the way around the model, and then I would do an insert edge, see if it would let me insert an edge on the outside. And you can see that it's not carrying that loop all the way around. So this tells me that that's going to potentially be problematic. If we change this to be an exact insertion, what you're going to see, I'm just going to say okay, but what you're going to see is it ends up adding a ton of subdivisions to make this work. So you can see down in this area, if we go to smooth display, it's still going to look the same as it did. That is not the solution that we want. So Control Z to undo that, Alt and 1. If we have to do this manually, the best thing I could say is that we want to start manually introducing edges. So I'm going to start from here. I'm going to come over. I'm going to try to connect to something. So on the side here, I'm going to connect there. I'm going to say OK. Right click to repeat that. I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to come over, over, and connect there. And then right click and repeat. I'm going to go from this one to that one right there. And then just take a look. So now, Control-4 to hide the edges. So now you can see that we've actually managed to get something that would likely be okay. We could thicken this outward. The transitions are really tight, but we could thicken this outward and it would work. We probably need to do a bit more than that, but it's a good starting point. The next thing we would want to do is start to massage some of these edges. So let's get to edit form. I'm going to pull these backwards. Probably best to do it from a top view. And I'm going to do them individually, actually. So I'm going to go there, maybe pull that back. And what I'm trying to avoid is you can kind of see things are kind of twisted, but I want to pull these points out. And this one probably out. Same thing here. Because remember, if it's flat, then generally it's not a good reason to have it there. So pulling it out is going to make those transitions a bit better. This one, I am actually going to, I'm going to move that point inward a bit to make it wider and pull this point up. And then let's just take a look. Control and 4 to hide the edges. All right. So we can see that we've got kind of a sharp transition going on here, and it disappears here. I really want this to be a bit smoother. So we need to manipulate these. So go to the right-hand side view. And it's going to be really hard to see. Sorry about that. It's kind of obscured. So maybe the bottom view would work. Yeah, let's do a bottom view. Yeah, this is highlighting the problem pretty well. All right, so again, with the flow of edges, we want them to look parallel or to start to be converging. So that looks pretty good. I don't really want it to be that drastic or that sharp of an edge. So let's go ahead and pull that back. And let's take another look. Control-4 to hide the edges. From the top, you can kind of see that it looks very much like Batwing. I think I also want this to taper a bit as well. All right, let's bring the edges back. That's going to be a bit trickier to do, unfortunately, but let's see what we can do about that. So I think what I want to do is maybe make it wider up front, and I think I can do this. I'm going to try something here. So select that, move it out a bit, and then just the face, move it out a bit more. All right, I think that probably want this one to be a bit wider, and then we'll move these two. So after we've gone this far in a design, making changes like that are not ideal. But if you do them very gradually, you should be okay. All right, let's take a look at it in smooth display. Yeah, it looks okay. So just so you know, this shape here is very reminiscent of the original Tailsection. And the back was kind of like this, but flipped the other direction. It was tapered forward. So I'm trying to mimic that style. And the sharp edges are a little bit like GPZ 900. And so, but I want to soften them up. That's a bit too harsh for my liking. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to take that top point there, Then I'm going to try to box select everything in that corner, pull it out and back. That looks a bit better. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. I think I'm pretty happy with that. All right, so the next thing for us to do is let's copy and paste this. If we're happy with the shape and happy with the design, actually let's double check clearance on the subframe because I've got a lot going on here. Looks like it's probably okay. Remember, this is the inside. It's going to be thickened outward. And this is our mounting tab, which we're going to deal with in the solids. But if we're happy with that shape, let's go ahead and copy this and paste it. So we're going to call this one, let's go ahead and call this one surface. And this one's going to be our solid because we're going to thicken it. We're going to thicken it here in the forms. Before we do, let's do a save. All right, so we want to select the solid, go to modify, and thicken. So generally with stuff like this, 3 millimeters is going to be pretty good. We're going to use normal direction, which will go out from the curvature. Sharp is fine. This means that it's going to have a crease on the inside and the outside. And we'll say okay. And now what we have is a solid version of the tail. So when we click finish form, this one will get converted to a surface. So we'll have that one in there. And this one will get converted to a solid. The main reason I say to copy it is because going backwards from a thickened version is very difficult. It's very difficult. But before we get out of here, before we lose the ability to undo if we save it and close the file, what I'm going to do is hit Control-4 to hide the edges. I'm going to go to Inspection and Curvature Map Analysis. And I want to look at two things. First is going to be just exactly where the lines are flowing. So what we see here is that we've got these transitions happening, which is exactly what we want. This is going to be very gentle. It's going to transition here. And then the side, it's curving in and then it's curving out. And then all these lines are flowing to the back. That's what I want to see. But the main thing that we want to do is take a look at this and this last option here. And essentially what this is going to do is it's going to give us the ability to look at the radius of curvature. So if you were taking this as a surface and going to thicken it, and let's say you wanted it to be 3 millimeters. If you put in 3, anywhere that's red is going to be smaller than 3. So if you were going to thicken this inward from this surface, for example, that could potentially go to a sharp corner. It would fold over itself and potentially cause you problems. If we go down to 2 and that disappears, then 2 millimeters would be fine for everything that we see. Potential problem here. Since we thicken this outward from the form itself, that's not an issue. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put 10 here. So what this allows me to do is it allows me to see the sections that are below 10 millimeter radius, which is good because it should just be the areas around the main perimeter and then around the back. Can you kind of see that there? Now, if we go up to 15, anything below 15 will start to show up. So you can start to see right here, you can see that one fades away, which is exactly what we wanted to do. And then if we go even bigger, let's say go up to 20, we start to see these getting darker, which means a wider section is below that limit. This is still fading away. This is fading away. These are all the kinds of things that I want to see. Any of those main accent lines that I was trying to do, so for example, fading away to the back or fading away to the front, this is kind of what I'm looking for here. I don't need to keep that, but that's, you know, kind of a general last check for me. And then I'm going to finish the form and cross my fingers that there's no issues. There shouldn't be because, again, we thickened outward. All of the corners that we had that would have been problems thickening inward shouldn't have been a problem when we thickened outward. And for our purposes, we still have the surface, which we could thicken with the surface or solid creation tools. The solid is what we're going to use, but it's always a good idea, at least in my mind, to have a backup. So I like to, anytime I'm doing something like this, and even usually when I'm at the original sort of base level of the design, when I've got a very low polygon or low face count model, I generally will go to lengths to create a copy of that so I can always go back and use it. But right now we've got a solid body, and if I bring the tank back and hide my edges, this could now be sliced up and 3D printed, but there's still a few other things that we want to do to it. We still need to add a couple mounting tabs, and you can see there it looks like it fits pretty well, and it should fit around the tank pretty well. It looks okay. But I think this is a good place for me. I'm gonna go ahead and save this, and then we can come back and start hacking it up. But I'll save it right there. Now that we've got our solid model, the next step in this process is to add all the features we need to mount it, and then we also have to slice it up. So I'm using a Bamboo P1S. The claimed build size for that is 256 millimeters tall, but you actually have to modify the machine to get that to work. And if you make it 250 tall in Fusion, I've noticed that there's like a rounding error to where it comes into the slicer. For example, the left side on the first one I printed, this one over here, the left side came printed just fine. The right side said it was 25.001 and it would not print it. So we're going to slice this thing up at 240 millimeters, basically 240 millimeter sections. But first we need to add features that we can use for mounting. And there are a couple of ways that you can go about this. It's kind of a pain. It's kind of tricky to do. In reality, it's much easier to do if you have a surface and then thicken it, but we're going to work through it using sort of the solid method. So the tab on the right-hand side of the bike, the scan kind of, I don't know if it lost tracking or what, so I'm going to be using the one on the left-hand side, which was clean. So there's only a single tab there. On the right-hand side, you can see it ended up putting the tab here, but then the actual one is right there, but there's a third hole in the middle. So because of that, you can see the extra bit of subframe there. Because of that on the right-hand side, I don't want to use that. I'm going to use everything on the left-hand side. So I'm going to start a new sketch and basically just make a circle that is in roughly the right location. I'm going to make it 10 millimeter diameter. I believe, I don't remember exactly what size thread inserts I used in here. They're pretty small. I want to say they were like 1032 imperial size. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 circles. And basically the plan here, let's make the outside one 20 millimeters. Doesn't need to be that big, but the plan here is that we're going to slice the solid up. The inside piece is going to get moved a distance that makes sense for where the tab is or close to it. And then the outside one is going to slice the tail section and we'll loft between them, kind of filling in the gap. So a little bit of a cheat, but that's how we're going to do it. So let's hide that and bring the solid back. I don't know why Fusion hates me so much today, but it is struggling with these meshes. Hopefully you're not having nearly as much trouble with this. And also, I know that this video is super long. I never intend to make them this long, but I know a lot of people ask a lot of questions about doing freeform modeling like this. So I'm going to just keep it long. So I don't love the fact that this is rolling over that nice clean edge. So because I know the actual screw size is going to be quite a bit smaller, I'm actually going to make this smaller. I'm going to make this one smaller too. I want to avoid messing up that edge. So on this side, let's go down to 14. Yeah, that'll be okay. Not ideal, but I'm going to run with that. And I'm also going to lock the center of it down just because I don't want it accidentally moving. All right. So again, the way we're going to do this is split body. So bodies to split is the entire tail section, the outside tool. And basically what this is going to do is it'll split it into those 2 extra pieces. And then I'm going to do this again, body to split. It can only do one at a time, unfortunately. And then the splitting tool will be the inside. Right click and repeat that. So body to split and the inside tool. So basically the outside pieces aren't needed. I can actually go ahead and right click and remove them. And then the inside pieces are going to get moved in until they touch the tank where they need to. So we're going to hide the main part of the tail section, bring the no tail tank back, and then we're going to say move body. So I'm going to select this one here. And the main reason I'm selecting it from the browser and not here is because if I select it here, the pivot point is going to be aligned to the curvature of that part. And sorry, let me rotate it this way. And I don't want it to be aligned to the curvature of that part. I want it to be aligned to the coordinate system. So I'm going to pull this back, let's say -8. It looks like it's okay. I don't like these tabs can be bent a little bit as well. I'm not super concerned with it being precise. That'll give me a little bit of leeway there, -8. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. This time it's going to move +8 and say okay. Now theoretically that should line up with that tab there. You can see it's overlapping a little bit, but again, I think it'll be okay. If I'm worried about it, we can always go back and adjust this. Now, unfortunately, Fusion doesn't record the distance that you moved it. So you have to remember, I'm going to go ahead and just move that one 2 and this one -2, just to give it a little bit of extra space, just in case, you know, things are off from left to right. All right, so now let's hide the scan and bring this back. So when we're talking about using a loft, like a solid loft, the profiles have to be, in order for this to work, the profiles have to be planar. And that's not going to work in this case. So we're going to go to a surface loft, and we're going to go from this outside edge to this outside edge here. We're not going to worry about making them tangent. I'm just going to leave it going straight. Then we're going to right click and repeat that. And then we'll go from the outside to the outside. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. Repeat loft and go from inside to inside, right click, repeat loft, outside to outside. And then we want to hide all these surfaces, and we're going to, nope, not revolve. We're going to go create an offset of this inside, this outside piece, and the same thing over here, inside, outside. And the main reason for this is because now what we can do is we can stitch all these surfaces together, and this is going to build a solid. So I'm going to do it on this side first. So that offset surface, loft, offset surface, loft, and that'll turn that into a solid body. So now it's a solid body there, and we'll do the same thing over here. So we've got loft, offset, solid body. So now if we bring back the little plugs and the tail section, we go to combine. I'm going to join this with all of these extra little pieces and say okay. And now what we have is one solid body with those mounting tabs. And these should print okay. But what I'm going to do is let's go over here. I'm going to put a large fillet here. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Oops. Oh, let's do it here. That'll be okay. I'm going to say plus because I want to add a smaller fillet to the outside. It doesn't need to be as big. And we'll add it over here, control. And if you want to, you can also add a small one to there. We only really need to worry about the hole going through the center. I'm not going to model the hole. I'm going to drill it after the fact. And that'll give me a little bit of flexibility in case it doesn't fit quite right. And that looks okay. All right, of course, we could have played around a bit more with, you know, making the tail section fit a little tighter. I could not use those tabs for mounting if I wanted to, but overall, that's going to be the process. Now we're going to repeat that. I want to also mount the seat section to the subframe, and I'm going to do that from the top as well as the bottom. Now remember, there's nothing going on back here. If we do inspect and section analysis and look at this thing through the middle, basically what we want to do is I'm going to put a couple of, there's the tube that goes across right here, And that's going to be, I'm going to have a tab that I can weld that comes over here in sort of that area. And then for the seat, what I'll probably end up doing is building a bracket that comes up to meet the tail section. So I'm going to make some little pockets that drop down. It's very, very similar to how we did it through the side of this. And that way that gives me a mounting option. So right now you can see that it's not really touching the subframe, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to. The main thing that we want is we want to make sure that it clears everything, and this little gap right here should be enough for the shock reservoir. Again, the next episode is going to be when we tackle that part, but that's kind of the thought process here. So a seat mount and an undertail mount to the subframe somewhere in that area. So if we hide the analysis, hide the solid body, we've got, this is the tank mount. There's like a 10 millimeter nut that holds it down. And then I'm going to have basically a piece across here. I'll make a tab, a bracket. Maybe we can do that in an episode. And then across the bottom, I'll have a tab that comes off of there. So from the top, let's go ahead and create a sketch on the top plane, figure out where those are going to be. Remember, the subframe looks a little twisted here. So in order to make this work, I'm not going to do just the two circles like I have on the tabs for the side. I'm going to make a slot. And the slot, I can just drill holes wherever I need to when I'm ready for it. And that way I can double check and I can redo the subframe if I have to, or I can adjust it if needed. I spent a lot of time measuring, but it's still very possible that it's off, or it could just be off just enough in the scan. Honestly, I'm not too worried about it, but so in the top section, probably right where I'm sitting, I'm going to put a mount, so somewhere across there. So what I'll do is I'll take a sketch line from the origin and come down to where I want that. Because remember, the tail section should be symmetric there, even if the tank and the subframe and all that seem a little bit off. The tail section itself should be fine. So then I'm going to do a horizontal line here. I'll do a midpoint constraint, and then I can just use dimension tool and figure out how wide I want it to be. So let's just say 75, turn it into construction with X. I can dimension this if I want to. The number doesn't really mean anything just because it's from the origin. And then what I'll do is I'll just use my slot tool. So we're going to do a center to center slot, maybe right there. I'll make it 20 millimeters and right click and repeat. Center to center again. This time we'll make it 10. So we're going to use the same process of split body, and we're going to get that on the top side. And then we could duplicate this on the bottom. So what I'll do is I'll double click both of those, and I'll grab the center as well. And we can do move copy or Control C, Control V. When you copy and paste geometry like this, it's not going to carry the dimensions, but you can use things like equal constraints between those. You can see it says it failed to solve. We can also add a line that goes from the midpoint of this one to the midpoint of that one. Make that construction and make sure that it's vertical. And then let's see what we got. I'll make one of these horizontal. And I'll give this a dimension, let's say 45. There we go. All right, so hide the scan, bring this back. So the front one is going to be the split for the top, the back one to split for the bottom. So split, bodies to split. It's going to split through everything. So keep in mind that we will have to join these things back together because it's asking about extending the splitting tool. If you don't want to do that, another option you have is to create an extruded surface. Actually, we can do all of them at the same time. Let's go ahead and do this. So I'm going to pull these down until they go through the top, but they don't go through the bottom. And we'll say OK. And then we'll repeat that and we'll extrude these two. This time I'm going to do an offset. So let's say 250. It's going to be negative. And then basically just make sure that it goes through the bottom all the way. Maybe let's make that 240 just to be sure. And there we go. All right, so the main reason to do something like that is if you don't want split body to break everything up, doing this allows us to not extend the splitting tool. So then this outside one, I'm going to hit V to hide. I'm going to repeat the split body. This time we're just going to split that piece, and we'll select this as our split tool, hide that, and then this piece would get moved down. Again, I'm going to drill these holes, so I'm not too concerned with this being flat or anything like that. If we needed it to be flat, the best thing that we could do is basically add a plane. So for example, let's say at the bottom of this one, what we could do is if we wanted it to be flat and up against the subframe, let's go ahead, bring the subframe and let's hide this. If we wanted it to be flat here, then what we could do is go ahead and just patch that bottom. And then with that patched bottom, we can thicken that into a solid. So go to create, thicken, make it, I'm gonna go -3 millimeters. And what this allows us to do is now we've got a flat that we can then loft between. So either option's fine. I'm gonna go ahead and delete that. If we wanna do that, we should really do it from the inside one. And you know what? I think for this, let's go ahead and do that. We'll just to take a different approach. So we're going to patch that. That is the inside piece. And rotate that around. Create thicken, 3 millimeters. And then just like we did before, we're going to loft from the upper edge. Make sure that chain selection is on. We'll go upper edge to upper edge. That looks like a mess. And part of the reason for this is it's twisting. So just drag that around until it snaps to the right place. God, that looks awful. All right, I don't like that. Let's clear that out. All right, if this is the problem, turn off chain selection, and then we'll just go from this edge to this edge. We'll repeat that. We'll go from this edge to that edge, repeat that. And then now, if we do a loft, we can go from that upper edge to that upper edge. And we probably don't need it because these will be straight, but we can use those, and we can even add tangency if we need to. So repeat it on the other side. Sometimes with complete closed profiles like this, loft has trouble because it doesn't know where to start and end when it's completely kind of closed profile like that. So I'm going to just stitch these together. And then we have to repeat that in the bottom. So let's go loft, bottom edge to bottom edge. Again, right click and repeat. Go bottom. If you can't see this edge, you can also hold down the left mouse button. And if you're over it, you'll be able to select it. If you're not over it, however, you just need to try again. And we'll loft from bottom edge to bottom edge. I'm not going to worry about the guides because honestly, when you're lofting without tangency, it's straight. It doesn't really matter if you add those guides because it's just going to be a straight from the end of that profile. As soon as you start adding tangency and driving the direction, then it starts to become a problem. But for something like this little corner, it doesn't matter. And you can see here, it's thinking real hard for some reason. I'm going to just let it think. You don't want to ever click and try to rush it because that's when you get yourself in trouble. All right. Error about the recovery file. It just means I haven't saved in a while, which I know. I'm well aware. All right. We'll say OK. I will stitch those together. And then we just need an offset. So offset, if you do chain selection, it should grab that entire inside and the entire outside. Then we can hide solid bodies and stitch these together. So offsets and lofts, and that'll build a solid piece. We can bring that back, and we can bring the tail section back, and we can combine them. So that this, and this. And now we've got a little spot there that we can mount. Keep in mind that these could potentially end up exactly in the middle of our slice plane. Also keep in mind that could also potentially cause problems with printing. Generally, I print these without support, but that may require some support, just something that we're gonna have to keep in mind. So one benefit to this method, it gives us sort of individual control. And what I mean by that is the original extrude, so this one here, for example, if we go back to this extrude and bring the tail section back, if I decide that I don't want this to be so deep into the tail section, for example, we can make this minus 225. And as long as that is a flat section below the surface, then all the rest of the feature should rebuild properly. So the offsets and everything like that. That solid piece is extra, but you can see there that little flat spot rebuilt. So that works out pretty well. Those screws can be, if I end up with 2 screws there, they can just be under the seat. If I end up wanting to do something like these dimples, we always could. But for a feature like this, for mounting, these are just different ways that we can do it. I'm going to go ahead and probably do a larger, that's going to be too big, a larger fillet radius here. It doesn't want to carry around. And part of the reason is because I didn't use tangency on those edges. And again, I said it doesn't really matter. And in reality, it doesn't. But you can see that it did not really like going around that. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and do it on the inside as well. Just make sure selecting all the way around. And we'll do the same thing on the bottom. I could select the bottom face and it would do that fine. We'll say okay. All right, so that should print no problem, especially if we slice it and print it this way, where the least sort of tapered angle. Let's go ahead and we'll take a look at a section analysis so we can see what I mean. But basically, the flat spot is going to be somewhat vertical with the build orientation, so it should print just fine. This also gives us the ability to do a horizontal brace on the subframe, and I could use more than 2 bolts if I wanted to. Whereas if we did a little pad like we did on the side here, then we would potentially have to, we would have to do more. So you can see it gets a little thin on that side just because of the angle, but overall, that'll work for what we need. Let's go ahead and turn that back off. And now for the bottom, let's go ahead, let's see, let's get rid of these 2. And what are these? I need those. I can get rid of that. We'll remove them. This is our tail section. What is this piece? That piece can go away too. All right, so now we're left with the same thing. Split body, split tool. I'm gonna go ahead and do the inside split, repeat that, and then split body, split tool is the outside one now. Don't need the surfaces and don't need that piece. So V on the keyboard will hide it. And then the body that's left is our tail section and then this piece here. Now remember with this, the subframe is going to be kind of close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this up 2 millimeters, just pretty minimal. And if we want to, we can take a look at kind of how that falls. Let's go ahead and rotate this around. So remember the bottom of the tube is going to be about there. That would probably fit okay. So let's see what we're left with. I don't need that piece. We'll right click and remove. And then to make this a bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and do the offset first. And we'll grab that side. And the reason for that is now I can hide the tail section. I can even hide the solid body. We don't need to see it. And then I just have everything I can select for the loft. So we'll go chain selection on this one. We'll go from there to there, see if we can get a good clean loft. It's still twisted. So this tells me that, again, I need to drag these endpoints until they snap to something. And I think that'll be okay. It's pretty minimal in this case. A little bit of a weird twist going on right there. Another way that we can get around this, and actually let's step back a bit because surfacing is something I get a lot of questions on. Another way we can get around this is if we split these in half. They don't actually have to be fully split. If we do, let's say, split face, let's go ahead and grab all these faces. We're going to split them with the midplane. And the reason for this is because now if we go to do a loft, I'm going to turn chain selection off, but I'm going to work my way around just the bottom half, and then we'll do over here as well. So now it knows exactly where the profile starts and ends, and then we won't get the weird twists that happen in the corner. So that is one option that you can do, especially if you need to run a guide curve or something. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. So those are just, a couple options. You can do the lofts, actually clear that, turn chain selection off. You can do the lofts from the straight sections like we did before. Right click to repeat. We'll go from here to here. Then we'll go from the round section to the round section. And again, if you want to add the guides so that the fillets will carry on, you can add tangency here. And that will make sure that we have continuity going across those. It's still going to be the same. I don't know why Fusion is picky about this, but it's still going to be the same since they're essentially going in the same direction, but it wants to have that tangency there. I'm going to go ahead and stitch those together. While I'm here, I'll also stitch these together, so that way it's just the top piece. With patch, this doesn't really work with multiple profiles like this. It does work if you've got multiple sketch profiles. You can actually patch a closed section, but when they're in 3D like this, it doesn't work. So what we have to do is, again, we have to loft. So we'll go from here to here, right click to repeat over here, and then this one here. It would be nice if we could tab between menus. We can tab between decimal input boxes, but we can't tab between like selection boxes. So for example, if I hit tab here, it doesn't jump down to the rail section. That would speed the process up a little bit, but it's just minor. Once you know where things are and get comfortable, it doesn't take that long. All right, so now we stitch these four together, plus the bottom piece should give us a solid, and we're left with 3 solid bodies, and we can combine them. So main tail section, that lofted piece we just created, and this piece, and then F for fillet. We'll just add a 1mm fillet. You can see that the tangency worked here because it's going all the way around. We didn't have to manually select it, and say okay. All right, so now we got mounting tabs on the bottom and mounting tabs on the top. A couple of other things that we need to consider. One is going to be how we're going to attach these together. In general, I use like a 2-part epoxy to hold them together. Z's Garage did a fairing on his bike recently and used a plastic welder, so where it had the basically metal pieces that get inserted into essentially a soldering iron, and it heats up, melts into the plastic, and then the metal pieces stay. That is a great idea, and I couldn't really find one locally very easily, so I'm just going to use epoxy on this, but there are options. So what we need to do is now we need to split this thing up. If there are no other features that we need to add, as I mentioned, I'm not really sure what I'm doing on the tail light just yet, so right now I'm not adding anything. The last piece of this, I'm not going to epoxy. So I'm just going to leave that sort of open for now. But what I want to do is I want to start to build out essentially, let's go ahead. I'm going to fix that corner down here and then rotate this around. And I'll probably unfix it as well once I'm done. And let's go ahead and give it some dimensions. So as I mentioned, the printer I'm using says I can print 256. 250 gives me trouble, so I'm just going to do 240 millimeters. And I'm going to make the length and width the same. And then basically what I need to do is build out these sections so that I can split the rest of the tail section up. This can be done, I mean, we can just use lines if you want. So those will be perpendicular, kind of find the extension here. And I'm just going to make another one over here. And then I'll make a sort of a last one. And basically what we want to do is we want to make sort of each of these equal, make that one equal, and then we'll also make them collinear. So those will be collinear. All these parallels sometimes are going to throw up a warning, and then make things perpendicular. So this with this. And if you get all kinds of warnings doing it this way, it's likely because something was made parallel. So you can see like these are parallel when really this needs to be collinear with this. And this one needs to be perpendicular. This one needs to be perpendicular. And then that kind of built out the box. But basically what we want to do is pull this down and figure out a good place that we want to break it up. Now, for me, I really want this section up front. I want it to connect back here. So it's one piece. It's going to be split in the middle, but it's essentially one piece. So as I'm looking at it here, that's really my first driving thing. I kind of want that, that to be it. And once I'm happy with where it is, I'm going to lock it down. And I need to lock down that line and also the point. And what this means is that this last little section is going to be the one that I can go back and I can reprint or redo with additional features for a tail light if I want. Because those features are going to get added after the form. As long as I don't have to go back and edit the form, then the sort of the way that this is broken up should be fine. So we're going to use split body, bodies to split, splitting tool. We'll start there. And then we'll right click and repeat. So now we're splitting this body up. That's my splitting tool. Right click to repeat, split that one up. And that's the splitting tool. And this is going to be too wide, so I have to split it down the middle as well, unfortunately. So because we can only do one body at a time, you can go back and decide to split the entire tail section up in the middle first if you want, and then split left and right. But again, it's just a single body each time, so it just does take a little bit of work. And this last piece here, I could probably fit it on the printer, but I'm going to go ahead and split it anyways. One other thing that we can consider, or one other thing that we're going to do, is how we're going to align and hold these pieces together. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to rename these. So this is going to be front, right. And it's important because when we export these as STLs to the 3D print slicer, it's going to be important that we know what they are, especially when, for me, I save it to a jump drive and take it to the printer. I want to know if I printed front right, front left. I'm going to call these front right and left, seat or mid right and left, rear right and left, and then I'm going to call that the tail section. So so this would be rear right. This one would be mid right. And I'm going to call that one tail right. And this one is front left, mid left, rear left, and tail left. All right. And the next bit of this is to make the features that are going to attach them. So I'm going to focus on the front, right, and left. So I'm going to hide everything else for right now. And essentially what I'm going to do is, these are planar cuts now because we just use a straight line. I'm going to just start a sketch. So right click, create sketch. And essentially what I'm going to do is project, which is P on the keyboard. I'm going to bring this other side and this one here. And we're going to just use a line. I'm going to come up and over and down. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Now you can overlap these opposite directions. So for example, if you want to come on the bottom one, if you want to come from the right over to the left, and then this one from the left over to the right, it doesn't really matter. It's all going to be the same. But basically what I want to do is create these little tabs. So I'm going to use my dimension tool. I'm going to make them the thickness of the part. So we're going to stick with 3 millimeters. 10 millimeters is going to be fine. It doesn't really need to be that long. We can figure out what we want this angle to be. Let's just say 130 degrees. And then this section here, let's keep that at 10 millimeters also. We could make it longer, but honestly, I don't think it's really going to matter too much. Just some way for us to do this. I'm going to go ahead and just make these vertical with each other. Going to make that line equal to this. And then I'll just dimension this angle here. All right, so the way that we're going to create these is we're going to go with a sweep. So I'm going to take this and sweep it along this path. And I want to join it, but only to the left side. So this means that I need to hide the front right if I don't want it to get joined, or make a new body. And then with that new body, what I can do is just combine it with this piece. So I'm going to bring back that sketch, and we're going to do the same thing again. So sweep, that's the profile. This is our path. This one is tricky because of the tank. We can't actually have it go the whole way. So I'm going to pull it back to maybe about there, and then we'll join it together and say, okay. So what this should do for us is we should be left with, and actually that bottom one, I don't want to take that all the way either. So let's go ahead and just roll that back to maybe there. So what this should do is it'll give us a little platform. The platform won't be perfect. So if it does overlap a bit, what you can do is select combine. And you can say, this is the tool body that I want to take material away from. And then, or the target body, I'm sorry. And then the tool body is this. And then we just say keep tools. And what this will do is it'll cut or remove it so that they exactly fit. Now, of course, with a 3D printer, we're never going to get a perfect exact fit. And the last bit of this, I'm going to go ahead and just add a couple fillets here. And there and there. It might not work. Let's try it. Yeah, it doesn't like this top one here. It doesn't like that one either. So that bottom one works okay. All right, let's see if this bottom one will work. No, okay. So we got a limit. 2 millimeters will work on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and just do 2 on the bottom, and I'll leave that upper corner sharp. So now we got a little alignment feature. This should still all be in plane because we started from a planar profile. And that means the two pieces will fit together. You can see there's a weird little sort of cut piece. It's looking kind of funky. That's because of the cut from the fender. If you want to clean that up, you can just select those and delete it and go back to the, this original shape. It's going to be just a minor thing in terms of the overlap there, but I think it's okay. All right, I'm going to run with that. So that's the front pieces. This is a good test because we could print these two pieces and screw them onto the tank, see how they fit before printing any other parts. The mid pieces, in terms of how those are going to lock together, we need to lock, if we're gluing, we need to have a good seam between this piece and both the front and the back, but unfortunately, it's not quite that simple. And what I mean by that is we can't really have these little tabs hanging off of the front and back because it needs to sit flat on the build plate. So what we can do is we can have little tabs that come off the front and go forward, and then off of the tail section part behind this, we can have tabs that come off it and go front and forward, and then we can figure out something else. Remember, we cut it at 240 millimeters. The printer can theoretically print 250, so we've got a little bit of leeway. How you do this on your own parts, it really is up to you. If you do have that sort of plastic welder gun, that's a great option, but you still will want some alignment features. So I'm going to work on building a couple of alignment features. Since this video is so long, I don't really think that we need to record all these little pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add them, and then we'll just take a look at them before I print. All right, so I got everything split up now. We're just going to take a quick look at what I did so we can kind of understand. Basically, just like the front section, we've got this left tab and this right tab. If we hide that body, basically you can see I repeated the process top and bottom. It just gives me a nice gluing area so I can put the left and the right pieces together. I can test how it fits on the tank and still see everything. And this gives me the ability to build out each section individually. And then I put tabs on the front, at least of this piece here, that will be able to fit inside. And because everything's at an angle, it's not all straight. This will need to flex a little bit to get inside, and then it should help align. And then when we take a look at the rear section, I did the same thing. Now, the main difference here is that basically what I did was I closed off these tail section pieces. So basically when I put this on the bike, this flat panel will be on the back, and I don't have any alignment features in there. It's just going to be a big, large, flat panel. That's okay because everything's going to be aligned up front, and this should give me enough room to be able to glue the back pieces together and glue the front pieces together. And if I need to, these are planar, these are flat, so I can just actually print some flat sections and glue one to one side and then have a nice big flat section for the other. So that's kind of what I'm doing on this back side. And this gives me a large, big area to attach to the build plate when I'm 3D printing. So one of the main concerns or considerations with something like this is this tab right here, at least in this orientation, is not going to print very well. So some things that we need to consider, especially with parts like this, is you may want to come in and add a large chamfer here. Now, if that's too big, maybe too big for the bottom one. But basically, as it builds up and it gets to this layer, if it tries to print that corner first, it'll be out in air. So hopefully, with this setup, it will actually print this little tab first, and then it'll work its way up, and that'll be okay. But this is something that you need to check out when you start adding tabs like that. So again, for this front piece here, what we would need to do is just remember that these things will be floating out in air. So you either need to be able to add a chamfer to them to kind of help that, or you need to add supports so that way there's something building up. And you really don't want to support building up this high. So I would opt for the tab route. And again, with these little extensions, it is probably a good idea to try to chamfer that bottom section or add a large fillet. So that way when it is building up, you won't have any problems there. I'm going to go ahead and do this on the other side as well. And go ahead and just add a chamfer there and there. Let's go ahead and just pull that down. And that's the mid section, and then the rear. We're going to go ahead and just take a look at, again, chamfer, and add it to there. And rear left. Yeah, looks like that one's not connected there. Maybe it's just too big. Let's try. Yeah, it was just too big. All right, so let's just add it there. And hopefully that 45 degrees will help when it's building. So again, the idea or the hope is that we don't want a situation where it's building a wall and then it just jumps a couple millimeters out in space to build the other piece. So now from here, essentially what I need to do is I need to make all of the 3D print files. It does take a little bit of time, so I'm only going to do it for one on the video, and then we'll just kind of check back in once everything's printed. So essentially what I do, I could nest a couple of these on a single build, but one, the spool that's on the printer is getting close to the end, and two, I generally find that ends up failing on me, or it gets stringy between the parts. Since I am printing a pla-cf and I've only got one full spool left that I hope is going to be enough to print this entire tail section, I'm going to go ahead and just print one at a time. That way, if the material runs out, I don't have an issue. So first step in the process is to align it to the build plate. Make sure that I am on pla-cf. I'm going to use all the default settings. Slice it. And this one, a little bit over 3 hours. So it doesn't give me any warning about support, which is good. There is a potential for having support issues here, but if we pull down through the model and see how it starts to build, because it's tapered, it does an okay job of that. So you can see there. All right, so I'm going to export that one. And front right PLA. And then I'm just going to repeat the process. So that was the front right. Then I need to do the front left. And at this point, you get the idea. Once again, the printer I'm using is a Bamboo P1S, and they claim it's 256 millimeters tall. In reality, the print slicer really gets mad if you get to 250. So that's why we cut it up at 240. And keep in mind, so a little bit longer on this one, keep in mind that with the other parts that have the extra little tabs on the top, when I was creating those, I did actually go through and measure to make sure that they were okay. So let's say the mid right, for example, I used the measure tool and I went from this, which is planar, and I went up to say this point here, 250.062. That is going to fail. It will 100% give me an error in the software. So I need to move this. And I can do this a couple different ways. So I could try to use press pull to move this face. Because it's just somewhat flat and it's got fillets on the corner, it'll probably work. But this would most certainly give me an error in the slicer because it's just a hair over 250 and it just doesn't like that. So I probably should go back to the original sketch that I used to create these. And if this ever stops calculating, I can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and try new offset and just pull this down and see if it works. So 1 millimeter should be enough. I'm going to go ahead and do the same to the other side. Probably going to fail because of those fillets. So instead of that, I'm going to hit cancel and I'm going to go back to the sketch that I used to create them. The sketch I used to create them is underdefined. So all I really need to do is show the sketch and then I can move it around to change that. Again, let me just let it finish thinking. I hit cancel. It shouldn't still be thinking, but oh well. All right, so from the top, this is our mid, and it was probably, let's see, sketch 9. Let's see, what sketch is it? There it is, sketch 6. So these, if I just pull this down, the fillet might fail when it rebuilds. I won't know. Well, it looks okay. And let's just double check the height. So again, we'll measure, go from there up to there, 249.014. So that's good. And we'll try it from here to there, 247. Okay, so now we're good just by tweaking that sketch. All right, so now I want to take mid-right, save as mesh. And again, there's really no need for us to show this process for every part, but you get the general idea. Just align it to the build plate, slice it, make sure it doesn't get mad at you about supports. It says, it looks like it has floating regions. It wants support. And when we get that warning, let's go ahead and pull down through. So I think the issue it has is right here, which we kind of knew was going to be the case, but that's why we chamfered him out. And what you really want to look at, and here's the problem, is this layer, it decides to print. You can see when it's printing, it's got that floating region. It's close enough to the wall that's already there. It's doing the infill last, but it's close enough to the wall that's already there. And it's on the inside of the part that I'm just going to run with it and let it potentially have a problem in there. So I'm going to export that. Warnings, blah, blah, blah. Please reorient. I don't care. Let me see if it actually exported. So that's the mid right. Yeah, it exported. Okay. And then we'll do mid left. Probably going to give me the same error. All right, so at that point, I'm going to continue to make the STL or the slice files for all the parts. I'm going to get them printing, which unfortunately is going to take a bit of time. So the front pieces are some of the quicker ones take about 3 hours. This one takes about 4 hours. This one doesn't give me that floating region warning, which is good. So I can go ahead and just export it. So that's the mid left. So if I'm looking at 6 hours for the front piece, another 8 hours for the two side pieces, and probably going to be more for the rear. Just try one and see what it looks like. Now again, I'm only going to print the front first and test it, because if the front doesn't fit, there's no reason in printing the rest. I'm going to go ahead and slice the plate. It's not yelling at me about height. Floating regions. Again, it's probably those tapered sections there. I don't care. This one's going to take 5 hours to print. But no supports. I don't want to add supports for that. I'm just going to let it eat, and we will export it. Yep, I know. All right. And then we just got a couple more pieces. I know I said I wasn't going to walk through all of them, but at this point it's pretty close to the end. We'll just add the last two. And then we're going to go ahead and check in when everything's all printed, and we'll see how it fits. All right, so there you have it. At the end of the day, we have built a tail section. So this one's glued together, not ideal. If you want other options for how to put these plastic parts together that you've 3D printed, I would suggest checking out Z's Garage. So he's doing a CB build, or a CB in an old CB 750 build, where he built an upper fairing. And he uses a plastic welder that's basically a high wattage soldering iron that melts metal to hold the pieces together. I couldn't find one locally, and honestly, it wouldn't work for this design because it is essentially completely enclosed. So all of that would have had to been on the outside of the part rather than the inside. So it just didn't quite work out for me. I would probably do things a little different. I'm sure that I'm going to print another one of these at some point. And the tabs that I use to sort of locate, lock, and glue things together, I would also put tabs on the side, because that's a big problem. The side actually shifted just a little bit during the curing process, and this is now bonded for life, unfortunately. So I would probably just add those tabs so that the sides were 100% in the right location. But other than that, I think it came out pretty well. The mounting points do line up with the tank, so I'm going to go ahead and bolt this onto the bike in just a minute. It's still curing a little bit, so I don't want to rush it and have it fall apart. I've got a couple pieces of duct tape just holding the last seam that's drying together right now. And once this is done, I will probably do, you know, a thin coat of body filler or something to fill in the seams, sand it, and get it all smooth. But I'm not quite to that point yet. I'm not going to do any fiberglass or bodywork on this thing until the end and do it all at one time, because it's very likely that I'll change my mind at some point, may decide that I want to make a change to the tail or add a tail light to it or something else. So I'm not going to commit any time to that at this point in the project until everything is mocked up, put together, all the parts that we're designing are on it, then it can all come back apart and get prepped and final parts can be made. But for right now, I'm pretty happy with the result. I think it looks very similar to the original sheet metal tail. There are obviously some differences. This was only a concept, so getting it to work in 3D and then in reality again is really the important part. So obviously I've built a couple of them, and I also did some testing, printing just the piece that fits around the tank to make sure that that fits okay. The final version ended up being a little bit different in this area. It's taller so that it clears the subframe than the first version that I modeled. But these are good tests. You can print a couple smaller pieces, make sure it fits where you want it to fit, and then the final one can go together and dedicate all the time to print. Now, in general, printing something that large takes time. On the Bamboo P1S, we're limited by height and size. I could have nested multiple pieces together, but I generally don't like to risk that. So the front pieces took about 2 hours. The seat portion each took about 3 hours. The bulk portion of it took about 5 hours for each side. And then the little end piece took 1 hour per side. So, in total, we're talking about 30 hours, somewhere in that range of printing. So it does take quite a bit of time. So that's why it's always important to think about the accuracy of your scan, making sure that's okay, thinking about the design in general, and not committing to a full 3D print until you're happy with it digitally, and then moving it into reality. So with this part, I think we're done for now. Obviously, once we get to the end of the build, we're gonna have to come back and do all the final tweaking and painting, and at that point, maybe I'll have another version of this that incorporates a tail light. I'm not quite sure just yet, but what we're gonna do in the next episode, which you've probably already seen some pictures of, is we're gonna take care of the shock clamp or the shock reservoir clamp for this bike. Now, I actually filmed these episodes backwards, so the shock clamp was done first before the tail section, but I did incorporate the space for the reservoir into this new tail section design, and all that's kind of taken care of. So if you want to follow along with the build series, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.